Okay, we're live with Chris and baby Petunia. I mean Juniper,
Juniper.
baby Juniper. Um, Maybe it was her flowers on her onesie. Good morning.
She can't hear
Good
you.
morning. How are you doing?
You want to say it here? Say it now.
And then we're gonna have Rowan on
That's his
in a few
voice.
minutes.
That's just voice. That's his voice. You hear
Boo, 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 boop,
it?
boop.
Whoa.
Yeah, Rowan's coming on to argue and fight about Israel. In fact, here he is.
All right.
It's our favorite leftist, Rowan.
Hello, how are y'all?
How are you? How was your trip? How was Spain?
It was good. I just got back really late last night, so I'm still a little bit jet lagged. We actually missed our train because I was hungover, but then we got a second one to the plane, so we got back in one piece.
Well, good. Did you go with family or friends?
Just
you
my
Spanish?
buddy, yeah, just me and him. We just made like a little spontaneous trip over there, and then we're actually going to go to Japan next month. So it's
Oh, cool.
a season of heavy traveling.
Fun.
Yeah.
Did
How's my
you?
audio, by the way? I'm not at my house right now. I'm actually at my dad's, so I'm using a laptop that's kind of shittier.
Oh, you seem fine to me.
Okay. Is there an echo whenever y'all talk?
Not that I can tell.
No, is there an echo? You're kind of loud, but not by much.
Okay. Well, cool. That is perfect then. What are y'all up to?
Just streaming as we do.
Very fun. So yeah, I don't know. I guess what details of the Israel stuff y'all want to hop into. I'm more just curious to just kind of listen and get y'all's take on things. Or I'm not sure if
I'm skeptical about that.
well, I mean, I'm going to offer some pushback, but I also just want to, I want
Well,
to
you had
learn
talked
about
about
that
maybe doing the
perspective.
history, starting with the history,
Hmm.
which it's complex and it goes back thousands of years, but it also seems to be a common pattern to it, no matter what area you look at, for either ethnic and or religious conflict between usually two main groups, sometimes multiple groups, but Arabs and Israel Jewish.
Right. Yeah, that is a big problem in the area for sure. I mean, especially, starting after, what was it after World War One, I believe, whenever a lot of Jews began to move to the area, and then especially after World War Two, after obviously the Holocaust, and stuff that just kind of pick up. And I mean, I guess I just want to start by saying, like, I support Israel's right to exist. I support Israel's right to defend itself. I don't have any problem with those two things. It's just I've been privy to in a lot of the research I have done. I can't help but notice a lot of what seems like Israeli expansion into areas that are predominantly Palestinian. I've seen a lot of like violations of international law as Israel is pushed into and like occupy these areas. And I'm just curious to hear, like, your perspective seems to be that you don't really think that Israel's done a lot wrong, or what is your take on that?
Well, not in proportion to what the Islamic terrorists have done. No, absolutely not. Like, there's not even a moral equivalence that's even close. And people that can see one, I that bothers me a little bit. But tell me about the expansion, because I don't know too much about the expansion part. I'm focused strictly really on Gaza, not so much the West Bank stuff.
Sure.
And because they have Fatah and Gaza has Hamas. But from what I understand, Israel got a bunch of land during those 2 or 3 wars they had, and they gave a lot of it back. So, like, to make Israel seem like this perpetual colonizer that's just expanding doesn't match what I know of the history.
Okay. So my understanding of it is that essentially, like, whenever Israel was formed, um, it did not occupy all of the territory, like the West Bank and Gaza. It was like relatively small because that area, was controlled by Britain, after the Ottoman Empire collapsed. And it was just kind of this ambiguous territory, and Palestinians, like mostly Muslims, some Christians, some Jews. And then, Britain basically just like declared that they were going to create the state of Israel or give a space for Jews to come live and have their own homeland. Which I feel like to do it in that specific area, I take Hitchens' position on that was just not a good move in terms of like if you were trying to set up a Jewish homeland in the worst possible area you could that would guarantee like a century of horrible conflict. They did a
Their
great
native
job
homeland.
at picking the one spot from 2,000 years ago. Like, do you think that? I don't know. I mean, what is your take on that? Because we
What
have an
if
exchange
somebody
on
conquered the
Discord of like
United States?
when do people's right to land expire? I mean, what do you think? If you settle the land once, do you always have a right to it, even if your like great times 20 ancestors come along later and want it
I
back?
think if you have cultural roots there, yeah. Like, what
Okay,
if somebody conquered the United States, exiled all Americans, in 2,000 years we wanted to come back and resettle America?
that's an interesting question. I mean, like, what if the Native Americans want their land back that we took from them 400 years ago? I don't know. I don't.
They
I
do
mean,
want it back. They
right. I mean, so should we give it to
tried
them?
to get it back.
Like, I don't know. I
So
mean, I it's a good question. Like, when does that expire? Like, when I feel like if you've just gotten your land,
when do people's native roots expire? I don't think they ever expire. I think your roots are always your roots.
so should America exist because we took the land from like hundreds of tribes of Native
Wait,
Americans?
I don't think that's a fair equivalency. I mean, from what I understand, I could be totally wrong about this, but did not many of those Jewish groups, many of those people that were trying to create the state of Israel, did they not buy most of that land?
Yeah, originally they did.
I
Yeah.
The
don't.
Ottomans sold it to the wealthy Jews.
It's
originally.
not like they
Wow.
just.
The
It's not like they
Ottoman
just
Empire.
came in just in where people were living and kicked everyone out and said, "No, we live here now." I mean,
Well, I believe that the British were given land or sold it by the Ottomans, right? But just the presiding government of an area, gives that land to like another nation. Does that then give that nation the right to come in and force, over 700,000 people out of their homes to create a racial ethno state for one group explicitly?
That's not
That
what
doesn't sit right with me.
I question your framing of some of this, but before we
Why?
even get into that, and yes, people that win land in a war it's their land at that point. They do have the right to decide what to do with it. That's always been the
Legally,
case.
but like
Britain was not an exception.
well, then I mean,
But
war. You could
before
say
we
is
even
immoral
get
in the
into
first
that,
place, but I mean, it doesn't really have anything to do. If you won a war, you won the war. I mean, that's the reason why people go to war. I mean, it makes no sense if you won a war and be like, well, but the people we conquered, they can just stay put. I mean, I'm saying if you're committing in something like war, which is kind of an atrocity into itself, I'm saying I don't see how the land dispute really factors into that at that point. I mean, you've already like killed a lot of people. You've already violently taken land from somebody. Now you're going to argue if it's moral or not. You're quibbling over who has the rights to this or that. I mean, it doesn't really matter at that point.
Well, I think that I don't believe that, and I don't know pre-1920 Ottoman Empire history, so I'm totally ignorant on this. But I mean, I don't believe that we were at war with the Ottoman Empires explicitly, were we? I thought that they gave Britain that land because they collapsed. I didn't know.
well, what Britain or the ally, whoever, talked the Arabs into revolting with the promise of an independent Arab state after they helped overthrow the Ottoman Empire, and so they did, and then they did not get their independent state. So, but that was pre-Israel and everything. So I would fault the British for that more than I would fault them for creating the state of Israel. Like they told the Arabs, if you help us overthrow the Ottoman Empire, we'll give you your independence, and then that didn't happen.
Okay, can you just give me your take then on kind of your? And I know it's a lot of history, there's a lot of details, but just kind of your like, what is like your overview of that process of Israel, like, and from 1948 until now, like, what are your thoughts on just that dynamic? I mean, do you feel like Israel is just pretty much in the right, and then they've just been subject to terror attacks from Arabs, and they've self-defense?
Yeah, more or less, but you don't. It doesn't sound like you think Israel has a legitimate claim to the land, even historically. And so I wanted to tackle that first, but I do want to let the audience know History.com has one of the best short summaries of the history, and Encyclopedia Britannica is the one I'm mainly going off of. I think it has one of the most thorough, brief accounts of that history. So those are my main sources.
Okay, I want to write those down just so I can go through
In
them
fact,
later
I will
too.
put the links in the comments.
Okay. I genuinely want to get the information from that perspective more too, because I mean, like every source is biased, right? And so my algorithms will give me predominantly like, anti-Israel biased stuff. So I mean, I'm open to more
And
information.
not to mention, okay, Britain got the land from World War I or whatever, and they had a Palestinian mandate. But then after they abandoned the Jews to the land, after the mandate expired, the Jews defended and kept and won the land in at least 2 wars of 48 and 67 on their own without even Britain. So that's like 3 wars that have established Israel's right to that land so far.
So
it just seems like it bothers you that they got exiled through no fault of their own, then got persecuted in pretty much every place they went because their culture was so different from the existing cultures they couldn't integrate. So they were the underdogs. All the people that root for the oppressed, the Jews were those oppressed.
Yeah, no, I know.
That they supposedly root for. So when they want to return to their homeland, they suddenly don't have the right to it anymore. Because
no. So
that's what it sounded like you were saying. Like
I
you were
agree with
questioning
you
why
that
they have a claim to the land after 2,000 years.
I think that if they wanted to settle a piece of that land, they could have. But here's the problem that I have with it: was they came in, and I need to look up the 1948 map again, because what I'm familiar with is the 6-Day War on is what I know more of. So pre 6-Day War, I need their borders, but I know that
there's some fake maps going around, so be careful. There's a set of 3 maps that show the Palestinians gradually losing more and more territory, and those are fake.
Well, no, so that so from my understanding, that is true, because in the 1967 war, I mean, that's whenever Israel, or the 6-Day War, as it's called, that's whenever Israel fully expanded into and began to occupy the West Bank and Gaza for the next 30 plus years. And so those were territories that were not theirs. And, the UN has said multiple times that they believe that Israel is in violation of international law on that. They have violated the 4th Geneva Convention. So like these are things that are pretty universally understood by most of the Western world, is my understanding. Like
they gave it back. They don't own Gaza now. They gave it back in return for a peace that they did not receive.
Well, so in 2005 they did pull out of Gaza, but they still control the airspace. They control the territorial waters of Gaza. They don't.
Yeah, they have to for their own defense. Gaza could end that at any moment.
How?
Stopping the terrorism, agreeing to the treaty or whatever, ratifying the land, and agreeing to Israel's right to exist. Have you read the Hamas charter? Like I don't understand how Israel gets the moral sympathy. Like Hamas gets the moral sympathy, or the Palestinians?
I don't give any moral sympathy to Hamas. That is not who gets my sympathy at all.
And we don't know where Hamas ends and the innocent civilians begin, because there's far more support for Hamas in Gaza than there is for radical Zionism in Israel.
Well, I mean,
I don't even think that's in.
I don't know if that's true. I mean, do you know
numbers? You just seem skeptical toward Israel in general. Like I'm thinking,
well, Paul's video bias.
Sorry, Chris.
Did you guys see Paul's video today?
Yeah, I did. Came out. I actually found myself agreeing with way more of it than I thought. I thought he did a good job. There were a few little points that I would quibble with him, but for the most part, I think his emphasis on the influence of radical Zionism is disproportionate.
Perhaps, but I do think he did a good job of illustrating the people in the tops of the Israeli government that are those extremist things. I think that has a lot to do with why Paul sees it the way he does, and why a lot of people see it the way they do, even though I don't necessarily agree with it. Okay, I'm just saying that I think gave me a lot more perspective
on those elements.
I agree, but I mean, like it was
probably 90% of Israelis would not even agree with having those people in their government either, which I think is different for Gaza.
Yeah,
but it's like Israel is held under this hypercritical scrutiny, and the Palestinians are seen as, I think, more innocent. There's an emotional bias that I don't know where it's coming from, other than people are playing out their own.
Can I can I
archetypal
attempt
myth
to
of underdog and
explain?
power and oppression on the
Right.
situation.
And I understand that. Can I try to explain where this comes from?
Yes.
Because I mean, so again, just before I jump into my thing, I just want to make sure, because I asked you to give me your kind of rundown of that history. I mean, do you feel like you've given it, or is there more that you want to say on kind of the
Um,
dynamic?
I haven't given a linear chronological rundown, but it goes like both of the sources I've looked at start from the ancient. Let's see, ancient Israel, when it was it was Canaan, and from what I understand, all of those ethnic groups are descended from the Canaanites.
Sure. I mean, I'm more concerned with more modern, like past couple hundred year
So that I
history
think
than like
starts with
2,000 years ago.
you could start it with the Ottoman Empire and the wealthy Jews that gradually began to buy land and settle there
Right.
legitimately, and then Theodore Herzl and Zionism, his proposal for the Jewish state.
I mean, really, we don't need to go back any further than 1948. I think it's
Yeah,
mid
yeah. I
40s
mean,
when the state of
yeah,
Israel was
that's
founded.
fine
That
with
is
me.
whenever it was established to have legal control, and I think that's as legitimate of a claim as you can have in today's modern world for having rights to land. Although I do think that a lot of those wealthy Jews did buy a lot of that land, giving them the rights to that as well.
Sure.
Now, don't get me wrong. It is a place where a lot of people did live and everything. But you look at how modern day Gaza and the West Bank and stuff are, and you look at what even Israel is like. They're very modern cities. They're not like backwards desert wastelands like people seem to picture in their heads. Um, and I think a lot of that is because of Western influence. I mean, it's Western civilization that has kind of grown it up and made it a lot nicer of a place than it certainly was for a long time. Which is why I think that it's so bizarre that people seem to have this idea that I don't know. I'm sorry. My brain is not working well. I've got the baby crying, but
No,
go
you're
off
fine.
of that.
Yeah. Okay. So let me give my here's and I mean, Jeff, if you detect a bias against Israel, I absolutely do have one, and I'll kind of try to lay out why that is.
Okay.
So 1948, Israel was established. Fine. I'm okay with those borders. I don't like that they drove out hundreds of thousands of Arabs out of their land to make Israel. I think that that's fucked up. But once that's said and done,
Was that Britain that drove them out, or Israel itself, or
it
both?
was but it was a joint effort. Yeah, it was the
It might have been a
establishment
joint effort,
of
but
Israel from Britain.
Britain who had the authority to do so, though.
Hmm. Yeah,
So I
and then
mean, who
so
literally
they
only
drove those
placed the.
people out of their homes. They bulldozed. They destroyed thousands of
So that bothers you from the
communities and
start, right
cities.
there.
That does from the beginning. But
Okay.
Well,
even
you
if
don't
I'm
have to be
willing
bothered by
to
that
look,
because all the people that did that are dead now. So there's really nothing.
But
I don't know who we're holding a grudge against. That's a bunch of dead people. So
well, you I mean, you could say the same about Israel and their homeland and saying, well, I don't, that it
I
doesn't
don't.
matter if the
I
Jews
don't
were
give
driven
them.
out
I don't
2,000
think
years
any of
ago.
the
Then
historical
no,
2,000-year-old shit. I don't think that shit matters. We're talking about modern day
Yeah, yeah,
politics. The
yeah. I mean,
claim to a
same.
land from
That's
2,000
also
years
my
ago doesn't
position.
fucking matter to me at all.
but
Yeah,
and we did the same thing to Native Americans. So I hope you're
Yeah, we did.
consistent in your.
yeah. No, I
And
mean, whenever you drive a population out of their homes and you mass export them, and like many of them die in the process, that's fucked up and
And
wrong to me
yeah,
I'm
it is.
Cajun. That's
across the
happened to
board.
my own people. So I'm also like I'm very sensitive to this issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't like it. So I don't
But I
like
don't
that
hate I
to
don't hate all
establish
British
Israel,
people
they had to
today.
do that to the Arabs that had been living there, that had homes, that had families. They bulldozed, they destroyed their communities, they scattered them
Yeah,
out. If they resisted,
they
they
did.
were killed.
It
I
was
mean,
wrong.
that's how that's
Where are you getting the source for this dramatic portrayal?
I mean, I guess I can give you, I mean, I've been like reading a bunch of different sources. I mean, I've read.
Because I'm not saying it didn't happen, and to the extent that it did, I don't think I think it's justified to have some kind of moral objection or to be bothered by it. So I'm
Yeah,
not criticizing you for that at all. It just seems like I just want to make sure it's not being exaggerated.
Sure, and that's fair. And I mean we can like try to get down to the brass tacks of sources too at some point. But so just to kind of walk through my understanding though is that is how it was established. Okay. And then you cut to, and even those borders, I'm semi fine with that. You cut to the Six-Day War in 1967, where Israel takes over the West Bank, they take over the Gaza Strip, they take over Golan Heights.
Were they attacked?
I mean, yes, but
So why
I
are
mean,
they held
this
to
is the
such
problem, though, is that
such-
it's always a feedback loop of attacks and then escalation, and then that justifying for further escalation. And even if you are attacked by people, you can defend yourself, but does that then give you a right to go and take over the entire countries
you
that
take over the
specific
entire
groups from attacked you?
country? They took over those few little parts of land you just named, and
Right,
if
but that's
if they're
all the
attacked,
land that the Palestinians
what's
have.
more important, the fact they got attacked or the fact that they got some land as the result of the war that happened after, as a result of the attack, like the defensive war they were it seemed like the priorities are messed
Well,
up. To
I
me, the
think it
attack is
ceases
way
to
more
be a
significant than the results of their
Yeah,
defensive war.
fact of the
I
matter
think that it
is, like, these
ceases to
attacks
be
get
a
instigated by
defensive war when you take over and then you occupy the land that, like, I mean, today it's over 2 million people that like live in Gaza alone. I'm not sure what the population was back then,
What
but
do you
whenever you
want them
take
to
over and
do, though?
occupy
They're
that
doing it
land,
for security reasons. Israel doesn't want Gaza. Egypt doesn't want Gaza. They used
well,
to have it.
I think that Israel wants all of the land because whenever they were established,
Okay, let's start
even
with that because
even
that's quite
so,
an assumption. What are
yeah,
you
so
basing
even
that
their
on? I don't think Israel wants all of the land. I think they're happy to have a 2 or 3 state solution. They've offered peace many times. It's the Palestinians that want all of the land. It's even in their
I
there
charter.
technically was peace until Hamas attacked.
we can go over that. I mean, both sides have
What do you mean? No,
rejected
there
peace
was
deals.
peace. There was no daily attacks of any kind until Hamas broke that peace.
Yeah, I
That
mean,
is a
there have been
fact.
3-month stretches of peace, but I wouldn't consider there any like super prolonged
There
period of
weren't any
But there wasn't
serious
a
attacks.
two-state
There was not an
solution
ongoing
in
war.
any case. There was not the two-state solution that they were working towards, which
well,
would
so
be
there
more of
have
a
been many
stable form of
two-state
peace.
solutions that have been proposed that both sides have rejected many, many times over. I mean, defeat of one party. Um, I know that, for example, after the Camp David summit, Israel proposed a two-state solution to Palestine, where they essentially divided the West Bank into 3 little sections. So they wanted channels that cut through and subdivided it, and it was just a totally fucked map. And so Arafat rejected that. He didn't propose a counteroffer immediately, but they kept talking. And then 5 months later, in January of 2001, they had the Taba summit, and there they actually arrived at a pretty decent joint agreement. They were working towards a two-state solution. Both sides said that this was the closest that they had ever come to peace. And then I believe it was 2 or 3 months after that they had an election. Ariel Sharon came to power, stopped those talks, and said that he was no longer interested. So that was an example of Israel throwing away that path to a solution, which
And
Palestine has done as
what
well.
makes you think? What
To
makes
be
you think if
fair.
those talks had continued, Palestine still wouldn't have broken the peace again and attacked like they have every other time? It's not just because he walked away with those peace talks. He probably didn't think they were getting a very good deal or this or that. But I mean, at the same
Well,
time,
so
they've reached many ceasefires, many peaceful, at least stalemates, and
right.
Palestine is the one that breaks it 9 times out
Okay.
of 10.
I understand, and I want to unequivocally condemn the terrorist attacks of Hamas because they're horrible and evil. I think at the same time, you have to look at why things happen. It's not like these terrorist attacks just
Why terror is justified?
no, because justification is not the same as explanation. Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. So we can explain why these things happen. I don't justify them. But if you have a state like Israel, which I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that they are an apartheid state with
No,
how
I
they've handled
disagree.
the
I
West
do
That
Bank
think
they're
and
there's
an
an
Gaza.
apartheid
over-exaggeration.
state. So
That's
I
not
need
an
a source for
apartheid.
that. I'm
Okay,
also interested in why you
that's what I
think
want to go
Israel
over,
wants
actually.
all of the land. Like what you're basing that on when it's clearly in Hamas's charter that they do want all of the land. So if there's any side that explicitly wants all of the land unequivocally, it's Hamas. It's the Gazan side. So what are you basing the fact that Israel also wants all of the land on?
Whenever they were founded, their president, Ben, I'm not sure how you say his last name, Gurion, was on record saying that this was not going to be Israel's final borders. He said that they want an expansionist state. He said that this was a good, like a temporary, like a half measure to getting to where he wants Israel to be, but that they're going to accept this temporarily as they expand to encompass a much broader region. And he's on record saying that in the
And you
40s.
still think, and I still think the Hamas charter is a stronger record than whatever this
I
one person
know.
said. But do you still think that applies today? Like, it sounds like you don't trust Israel.
I don't,
You
and
still
that's
think
what I
they
want to get into.
secretly
So can
are
we?
like
I'd
wanting
like
his
to.
agenda?
I'd like to dive into the history of why I consider them an apartheid state. So, if you look at whenever they occupied the West Bank and Gaza, 67 until, in the case of Gaza, 2005, which again, the UN, the EU, the International Criminal Justice Court consider Gaza a occupied state by Israel in many aspects, just because they're not there on
If it is
foot.
occupied, anything is occupied by Hamas
Voice cut off
right
for a
now.
sec. Sorry?
I said if it's occupied by anyone, it's occupied by Hamas currently. If the people don't
Sure.
want
I mean,
Hamas
then,
there,
yeah.
if they're not supporting Hamas, then the other alternative is Hamas is occupying Gaza. But it's not
I mean,
Israel that's
you could
occupying it.
consider them being occupied by Hamas too. That's probably fine. I don't like Hamas. I don't support Hamas at all. But look, but let's, because I think that the history makes all of this have some more
Okay.
context. From 1967 until 2005 in Gaza, and still to this day in the West Bank, whenever Israel occupied these areas, they drove, again, the number is well over 700,000 Palestinian Arabs out of their homes. Okay, they have bulldozed thousands and thousands of neighborhoods of Palestinians. They will annex areas and they will bulldoze houses and build Israeli neighborhoods that only Jews can live in. They tell the Arabs that you have, I don't know, so many weeks or days to get out. And if they don't, they just bulldoze their house over still. They take the land. The Arabs have been pushed further and further into these areas. There's a dual system of laws that apply to Jews, but not to Arabs, and vice versa. So, like, for example, in Gaza for over 35 years, they had it to where they made it illegal for if you were Arab, if you were Gaza, like not a Jew, you could not purchase more farmland than you already had. You could not plant any more trees unless you went through a ton of red tape that the Israeli government made you go through. Jewish farmers were given massive subsidies, lots of amounts of money. They could import and export infinite amounts of goods. If you were Palestinian or Arab, you were subject to far more just all kinds of bullshit red tape. And I need to pull up more specifics, but they were essentially blocked from buying more farmland, planting more trees. And as a result of this, tons and tons of Palestinians were just kind of shoved out of the agricultural sector of the economy. And it was controlled by mostly Israeli citizens. And so there were tons of laws like they implemented. More, for example, is like if you were, what was it? If you were a Jew and you married a person from the West Bank or Gaza, you were not legally considered like a full family. Like you didn't get citizenship. They couldn't come live in Israel. There are other things like you couldn't buy land. Like if you were a Jewish landowner, you could just deny selling land to Palestinians outright, purely on the basis that they were not Israeli. Sorry, my mind is going a little blank because there's just so many facts.
Do you have
I'm
sources for all of this?
Yeah. I can send all this over to you. I mean, it's all legal documents. Like it's all in the history of Israel. If you like look up,
I didn't see it in the history.com stuff or the Encyclopedia Britannica stuff.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, it's stuff that I mean, it was on the books. It was law. I mean, we can try to find primary sources if you want.
Well, where did you get it from? Because you seem pretty grounded in it. So did you read it from something or watch a video?
I base a lot of my research off of. Sorry?
I'm trying to understand your inputs because they seem very different.
Yeah, sure.
I'm trying to evaluate whether they're propaganda or not.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I will go sometimes onto like Wikipedia. I'll look at their primary sources. I'll go check from there, and I'll like cross reference them with. I mean, if I'm trying to really deep dive, I try to find primary documents, but I primarily just go off of like if there's 4 or 5 sources that corroborate the same thing, and they reference UN documents. That's kind of the main thing that I see commonly that makes me trust these sources, is that they're all based in UN analyses from the UN Human Rights Council, from the UN Security Council. So those are kind of where I'm getting a lot of my information from.
Okay. I'm on the Wikipedia article now, Arab citizens of Israel. So I'll be browsing it as we talk.
Sure.
Yeah, my main issue with that argument, and I'm not saying I've seen anything to one direction or the other on this, and I do think there is a lot to be learned there on my part, but I don't really understand how they could be such a restrictive fascist ethno-state when they still allow tons and tons of Arab people to live in Jerusalem. They haven't reclaimed the Dome of the Rock from the Muslims, despite the fact they're apparently run by religious extremists that could totally do that. They could bulldoze the thing tomorrow. I mean,
I need to look at the Dome of the Rock specifically. I don't know about that. I can't speak on that particular area. But
I just
know
keep
that
going back to the thing that I see that Israel seems a lot more tolerant of Arabs than Arabs are of Jews.
Sure. And I think that whenever you look at that history of all of those decades of them treating Palestinians as second class citizens when it comes to rights to own land, when it comes to pushing them out of their neighborhoods to build Israeli settlements, when it comes to, even whenever you look at the Oslo Accords, which was kind of an attempt to just let the land that it took from the West Bank and just kind of like cut it off there. They kept expanding. They kept building more military settlements into the West Bank even after that point. I'm not sure if y'all have seen the map of the Oslo Accords or how the West Bank is actually divvied up, but it's a shit show. I mean, Israel controls most of the West Bank, and the area that the Palestinians get, it's I don't want to say hundreds because that might be not accurate, of little geographic islands scattered throughout the West Bank, and Israel controls the border on every single one of these little communities. It's like pepperoni, and that's what the Oslo Accords, said, because Israel was already in those areas. They had already built all of the military settlement. Look at that, and I just think, fuck, man, like I get how if you have lived a multi-generational existence under a state like that, where you're treated as second-class citizens and they've taken more and more of your land, it just seems like that's going to produce such anger and such a backlash that is not justified. But it's like,
If
what
that's
do you
true,
expect to happen whenever you occupy a land like that?
well, they're not occupiers; they're legitimate, like residents or citizens, whatever,
By
of the
just
land. We've
taking the land
established
from the
that
West
after the
Bank.
British Mandate and the
At
two
this
wars
point,
of
yes.
independence.
Okay,
It's
so
But
been a long
that's
I'm
just
not
where we
convinced
very
that what
long
you're
time.
saying is
Jeff,
true,
right?
because the sources I'm looking at are saying opposite. So I have not yet been able to establish what you're saying is fact.
Okay, what is the
If
opposite?
it's
What are you
fact,
getting from your sources?
if it is fact, yes, you would have a point. But first, I have to establish for myself that that is actually the case. So I'm in the process of doing the research right now.
Sure,
I
and that's
posted
fine.
one link that I found from the Council on Foreign Relations, and it specifically says, one of their bullet points, Arab citizens have the same legal rights as Jewish Israelis, but they tend to live in poorer cities, have less formal education, and face other challenges that some experts attribute to structural discrimination. So it sounds more like how the woke
Talking
frame Black
about
people here in America
Black
than
people
any
and stuff,
actual legal barriers that segregate Arabs as second-class citizens.
It does.
So I'm
I know
looking
that
for the
for-
actual legal, like
I
on the
know that
book
for most
laws.
of the time there was a legal system in place, that there was and I don't know if
I'm
this is
looking
still the
for it.
case like today, but for most of their history, there has been a dual legal
That would
system
outweigh all of the
where,
terrorism that Israel suffered since the 1920s.
sorry, what?
That would outweigh all of the terrorism that was directed at
I'm
Israel
not
since the
trying to
1920s.
weigh or compare anything. I don't understand this
Well,
need to
I think you're making
compare
Israel
things.
seem like less of a moral actor, and the Palestinians is sometimes more
No.
innocent victims. But if they've been terrorists the whole time, and Israel is not doing the stuff that you say they're doing to the extreme extent that you're claiming they are, that changes the balance for me a bit.
No,
It seems like you're
for me, it's not a matter of weighing or comparing them. It's a matter of observing that what Israel has done in these areas for the history that it's been there, and what that produces as a backlash to that. That's why Hamas exists.
Are you
They
observing the
2007.
terrorism that the Palestinians have done to Israel, and
Yes,
how
yes, I am.
understand
But
why Israel would do the things they do for national security?
yeah, I don't think that anything that the Palestinians have done has justified Israel occupying their land. I don't think so. I don't, because Israel has a right to defend itself. But to me, self-defense is not taking over and militarily occupying an area
Maybe
and
it
ruling
is.
it and treating the people as second-class citizens. That's
I
not
mean,
self-defense to me. That
If
takes a
that's what they're
I
whole
doing,
kind of
other.
think it
that's
is,
what
though.
they're
That's
doing.
how way it works in today's society. That's what we did with Afghanistan. I mean, I'm not saying I agree with that necessarily either, but that's the way the world works. I mean, regardless whether it's moral or not, it's still the way the world works.
I agree, but I lament that's how it works, and I want Palestinians to be able to have a right to their own state where they're not subject to Israeli
They
expansion.
can. All they have to do is accept Israel's right to exist, stop the terrorism,
For a
and
long time
ratify
they
the
did. They
agreement.
did for a long. I mean,
No, it's in their charter. They even revised the
Jeff,
charter and kept it in there.
I know, but Jeff, Hamas was formed in 2007. Okay, this was like 15 years ago. I mean, you have to
Well,
look at the
Hamas is just
entire history.
another in a long chain of such Hamas-like entities. Before Hamas, I can't remember the name of it right now. I was just reading about this earlier, but it's been
Sure.
something the whole time. There's never been a lack of something to fill that void. There's always been this ideologically based,
I'm going to ask
religiously motivated faction in Palestine that's ultimate goal is the death and destruction of all Jewish people. And
Yeah, I agree.
I do not think there is, even though Israel has a lot of religious extremism and stuff in it too, and there are people that are like death to all Arabs and stuff like that. That certainly is, but it's not. I haven't been able to find it anyway. Find anything in Judaic teachings or anything that has anything in that compares the hadiths in Muslim law, in Muslim traditions that literally talk about the extermination of all the Jews. I mean, I just don't see it. I mean, like, there
Yeah, I
isn't
mean, I
anything
think if
equivalent.
if you look at that stuff, it is what the Hamas charter. If you look at what those factions want to do to Israel and to Jews at large, it is evil, it is inexcusable, and it's terrorism. There's just no way to slice it. If you are going to attack citizens, if you attack Jewish citizens and you kidnap them and you fly in on whatever, it is an inexcusable act of terrorism. But I'm saying that these things happen as reactions to feedback loops that are very, very complicated. And if Israel is not able to, and again, this also falls on Palestine, you know, this falls on the PLO, this falls on Hamas. If they are not able to broker some kind of peace deal, things like this will just keep happening because happening every 10 years or more for the past 70 years. We have never gone, I think the longest we've gone without some major attack is, I think, like 9 or 10 years, right? There's always things happening like this. And it's like you look at the history, again, of them moving into the West Bank, setting up hundreds of military bases, occupying the area, having it ruled under Israeli law, where Palestinians they don't have all the same rights as Jews do in many, many areas whenever it comes to
We don't know
finance, when
that.
it comes
We don't know
to
that.
buying and owning property. Well, so I am trying to give you my understanding of it, right?
Okay.
And whenever you look at that history, that anger goes somewhere. Bad shit happens whenever you treat a people like that and you occupy their area for a long time. So that's my
And bad
perspective
shit
on it.
happens when you airdrop into a music festival and massacre 1,400 people.
I agree.
It's, even though I don't think that Israel necessarily had to bomb the fuck out of Gaza, but you can't be surprised when that kind of shit happens.
I mean, I think that if you take an act of a bunch of terrorists coming into your country and horribly murdering civilians, and your answer to that is to then murder 10 times that number of civilians in that country.
It wasn't 10 times.
Well, it
was equivalent. It was equivalent, but it wasn't 10 times. I'm saying they could have done worse. They could have leveled.
They could have done worse.
They could have wiped out every man, woman, and children, that whole freaking strip of land.
They're coming
if they wanted to.
6,000 bombs as of 9 days ago. That number has not been updated since. But in the first, I think 5 or 6 days, it was 6,000 bombs dropped on Gaza. Gaza, the length of Gaza is from Dallas to Fort Worth. That's the
I
entire
know.
place. Okay, so I mean, if Israel wanted to go in, they have every right to go in and take out Hamas, to use special ops, to send on the ground troops, to track down every member of Hamas and kill the fuck out of them. I would totally support. Of course, I would support that, but that's not what they're doing. They're carpet bombing. And I cannot
They did
support
give
that
warning,
as a
however. They gave
response.
warning.
They
Hamas
told
gave
them
no
to
warning.
evacuate.
Yeah, they gave them a
Hamas
move while
stopped
like
them.
over a
They
million
tried to stop
people
them.
down south in a matter of a couple days.
It sucks, absolutely.
How do you
But
empty
they
the
did give
hospitals?
warning.
I mean, come on.
They did
I
not.
don't.
They did
Why
not
can't
blow up the
Israel?
hospital either. That's been
No,
proven
I'm not
in
talking
mainstream
about that
media.
one hospital. I'm talking about hospitals in general. How do you evacuate hospitals that quickly? You just can't. Um, I know that Israel didn't bomb that hospital. That was Hamas. But I I look at that situation and I don't see a justification for that. Why can't Israel go in with special ops and intel and just take out Hamas? Why do they have to drop
I mean, I've wondered
6,000
that too.
bombs in
I've
5 days?
wondered that too. I wonder that too, and I agree, but I don't have any actual practical understanding of what intelligence and that sort like what's it called Mossad and shit like that. I don't really understand what they have the capability of doing. It certainly seems like a better option to go in and take out all the Hamas members with like spies and shit, but that could just be movie shit that we have in our heads because we've been raised in American movies thinking that's possible, and I don't
Yeah.
know that that's actually that possible. I
Yeah,
mean, like you're
maybe.
talking about, think about like playing a video game, like a Call of Duty or something, and think of how complicated it would be if you were playing Call of Duty. In one level was an entire skyscraper where you had to go in and find all of the specific terrorists and not kill any civilians, and you have to go through this entire like 200-story
Yeah,
skyscraper,
yeah.
and you have to go in every
It's
single
it's
room. I mean, like you are asking something it seems a little
I
superhuman.
know it's hard, and I don't expect zero civilian casualties. Like there's some level of that that's just it's sad, but it's inevitable, and I get that. But what I'm saying is that I think that in a situation like that, it's kind of like what we did post 9/11. It's like there's such an understandable rage in the country, but then that gets channeled into let's just go in and kill way more of them than they killed of us. And I think that's not a good path forward, although I get the anger and I get the desire for vengeance. I just think if you're Israel and you have one of the most advanced militaries in the entire world, do the work.
That's a
Like
fair point.
do the intel, send in the special ops, and you can kill Hamas. That's fine. I don't see how carpet bombing the Gaza Strip gets them any closer to that goal. I don't, and that's what I find is unjustified. And to me, the reasonable take that I hear from people is to just you just condemn the atrocities of both sides. To say like it's just anytime you're indiscriminately killing civilians, that's never a good thing. And the reaction shouldn't be just more of that. That's what I have the problem with. And
I
again,
mean,
I,
I
I, I
agree,
just
and
want to emphasize that I don't at all
ultimately,
justify what Hamas did, but I'm saying that from my studies and all of the decades of what Israel has done in the West Bank, has done in Gaza, they have built up this intergenerational, that same kind of rage and vengeance that the Israelis are feeling right now. The Palestinians have been feeling for that whole time too, since the 40s. And so that does boil over into just bad, bad shit.
yeah, no, I agree. Every time you bomb a city, every time you do something like this, and you end up killing the children of parents and stuff, I believe me, I saw a clip the other day that just devastated me. I mean, it was a
Yeah,
Palestinian, as
me
far as I
too.
know, it was a Palestinian father sitting next to his son who was clearly dying. His face was half blown off, and the child was telling him, it's like an 8-year-old, telling his dad to not be scared.
Yeah. It's horrible.
It's
It's
not it's
horrible.
it's horrible. If I was that dad, you goddamn right to be radicalized,
Yeah.
against Israel. So yeah, I agree. You're creating more radicals every time you do this kind of shit. I know, but at the same time, these are the realities of modern day inter interpolitical conflicts like this. I don't know how else they're supposed to respond. I don't understand it enough to really have a comprehensive opinion on it. I just think that I think it's callous and pious for all of us here in the West, in America, to have much of an opinion on this at all. We don't really deserve one, to be perfectly honest. We try to do the best we can to be on the right side, but we have no power over it. We have no influence, and we don't suffer any of the consequences. So I just don't feel like it's right for us to sit here in armchair condemning people that are, I mean, I hate it for both sides. I hate the humanitarian side of it, but us trying to condemn Israel or condemn Palestine, it's pointless. It's stupid. We have no right.
Yeah.
What
No,
do you think of Hiroshima?
Who, Chris or me?
You.
Oh, I thought Hiroshima was horrible. I think that was also. I feel pity for all of the people that died in that, who were in a village in the middle of the Japanese countryside, and one day they were just eviscerated. I mean, that I get that war is complicated. I do, but I always err on the side of, like, I just imagine what would that be like if it was me, if I was a person in that city, in that country, and I was just one casualty, just a number in a governments were fighting, and they, I mean, that stuff just breaks my heart, and that's the thing that bothers me. Talk of, like, the strategy and the geopolitics, and there's going to be a few thousand casualties, and it's like, that's how everybody talks about it, but it's like and I get there's some level of that you can't avoid. It's just sad that I want to see as little of that as possible. So again, when I see Hamas, flying into a music festival and murdering babies, that makes me sick. And then I see Israel as a response be like, well, we're just going to start bombing the shit out of you. And then I see the babies on the Palestinian side with blood all over them too. And I'm like, fuck, man, it's just, there's gotta be a better way. And I know we don't have power to change it, but I just think that through maybe
the better way is for both cultures to let go of their fucking religious extremism and stop with the stupid idealism and grow the fuck up. That's what the solution is. And until that happens,
I think Israel's done that way more
than until the one's completely gone.
I think one side has definitely grown more up than the other. But do you think we could be just working off of different moral foundations? Like, you seem higher on the care harm axis, and I might be higher on the loyalty or proportionality axis.
Yeah, no, that's totally possible. Is there a test or something that we can take so I can?
There is. I took it live on my stream one day. Let me find it.
Okay, yeah. No, send it over. I'll do it.
And I think, like I said, and I told Paul this, I think we're working off of different inputs, because my research has not led me to the same information that you said about having the laws that create an apartheid state. So we may have different pictures of the situation on the ground as well.
I wonder if our algorithms, I mean, I wonder if our algorithms affect that.
Yeah, I mean, so to get me started, I just read all of the Wikipedia articles on the entire history and every little sub article. I went to those primary sources from the UN and their official reports of things that happened. I went through the reports of all of the peace processes from the from Oslo Accord to the Camp David to the Taba Summit and forward. That's just kind of what I've been doing. I don't read really like opinion pieces. I tried to just read mainly Wikipedia and like UN reports and stuff.
I didn't see that on Wikipedia, that the laws, there's actual law. I saw a lot of subjective stuff, like Arabs feel discriminated, or there's concerns and debates around this, but I didn't see any hard evidence of these are the laws that specifically discriminate against Arabs. So it sounds more like the woke here in America with the black people than any actual apartheid laws.
Here, I think this might be a good starting process. How do I join the chat? Okay, here it is. Connect your YouTube account to join the chat. Fuck, I'm not on my laptop.
Oh, or you could just send to me on Discord.
Okay, I'm on Discord on my phone. I will send this to you, Jeff, as just a starting place, because I read through. It's a Wikipedia article. It's called Israel and Apartheid, and this is just the general, all of that perspective of it. And I agree with you. I don't like seeing, like they're discriminated against. Like, I want hard laws, and I believe that this kind of gives a comprehensive list of then sources to kind of spiderweb out from there.
That's the kind of stuff I'm looking for, because I've been focusing from the start mostly on Gaza and not the West Bank at all, because that's Fatah, not Hamas, and so I'm not really familiar with what's going on in the West Bank.
Okay.
And currently they're not at war with the West Bank, even though they've committed more technical like offenses against the West Bank Israel has than Gaza has. So I think that's one of those
I
things
think with
where
Gaza they've just blockaded for their own protection because we see what happens
because
when.
they tend to live more peacefully with the West Bank residents than they do with the Gaza. From what
But
I've
I
heard.
don't think they're in there. They're not like an occupying military force. That would be Hamas.
Right? No, I didn't say that. There are police checkpoints and things to a degree, but I mean Hamas is the actual elected government there, so.
Right, but the people that are saying they're not, like that they're not supported by most people. The election was in 2025.
I've heard that it was a
That would
coup.
make them
That
an
Hamas
occupying
got
force. So
won
they're
by a
either
coup.
the legitimate government that's supported by the majority of Gaza, or they are an occupying force, depending on where the Gazans actually stand on the issue. I've
And,
seen
and if they are
pro
a
Hamas
occupying
protests in
force,
the
then
streets. I've seen the children's shows. Like it, I think there's more Gazans that support Hamas than not to
There
make it a
might
legitimate
be, but
form of
I,
government.
I think here's another spot where we have to look at who is accountable. Obviously, if you're a child growing up in a country and all you ever get exposed to is children's programming, because I've seen the Palestinian kid shows too. I've watched clips like that in years past as well, and I thought it was crazy. But like, is a child really responsible for having that sentiment if that's the country they grow up in? I feel, and once you're an adult, you can be accountable for the things that you do. That's fine. I just don't, I mean, because half of the population of Gaza is under 15. Again, I
It's
have a
more of an
hard,
indication of the the level of adult support for Hamas that they're even out there making these children's shows. Like this
I
doesn't
don't
sound
doubt that
like a people
there's
that
tons of,
doesn't support their government that would be doing
yeah,
all
I mean,
this.
I'm sure that there's tons of support for Palestine, but it's like then I think like wouldn't you
Gaza.
be radicalized if throughout your life you would lived through that same process? And then
That
it's like
doesn't absolve you of supporting and propping up a terrorist regime, though. In
view
my
of
book,
it, but again, I'm trying to look for explanation, not moral justification. Like I want to understand why these things happen.
but you
And
did
then
just say, would that not justify you becoming radicalized? I think that does speak a little
no,
bit
no,
to
no,
your
no, no.
mentality here.
I didn't say would that justify. I said wouldn't that make you radicalized too? I never said the
No,
word
you said
justify. I said what you
okay. I'd
said
have to go
earlier,
back and listen to it,
Chris.
but I'm pretty sure you said the word justified.
I don't think so because I just said what earlier that I thought was a good point that if you saw that happen in front of you that would radicalize you too. I think it
Yeah,
would
I
do that to
agree.
all of us.
I'm saying I don't think it justifies it. I think it would do it. I don't think it justifies it.
Yeah, no,
I don't
same.
think there's anything that really justifies radicalization. But yeah, I mean, like if that happened to me, yeah, I'd go John Wick on Israel too. So you know.
Yeah, that's all is that's why those things happen. And we can understand those things and still morally condemn them, but be like, here's why it happens. I look at crime in America the same way. I look at like if you grow up in an area with horrible influences and you grow up to be a criminal, you're responsible for your actions at the point of you doing them. But what you're not responsible is the circumstances of your birth that led you to become that kind of person because you didn't pick being born into
and
that
I
time.
don't think it's we're not blank slates either. It's not all circumstances because you could have several people in the same circumstances and they're
Yeah,
not
of
all going
course.
to turn out to be criminals.
Sure.
And I don't understand why Hamas is clearly to me the more radicalized, but Israel is somehow still the more culpable. There's just a dissonance to the whole view.
Culpable in, I mean, for me, it's part of it is the disproportionate nature of the power dynamic.
The power.
With
So anybody, if a power differential is great enough, anybody on the receiving end of it is automatically less culpable.
no, it's not that. It's just the fact that they've occupied these lands for so long, and they've been given many two-state solutions that they have rejected.
That the Palestinians have rejected over and over and over.
No, that there's
Both
one
sides have
that the
rejected. They're
Palestinians have
both
proposed.
guilty.
They are,
Both
but I'm
sides are
saying that
guilty.
The current offer
hang
to
on.
Hamas
They're
is to recognize Israel's right to exist, which means take that shit out of your charter, stop the terrorism, and ratify the existing agreements that they agreed to and that Fatah is willing to do. So all of that's been on the table for years, and it's been Hamas over and over and over that's
I know, but
refused.
prior to Hamas,
Well, I'm
Israel
talking about
two-state
since they worked
solution.
out this agreement.
How far back should we ever go in this sort of thing? I think the only thing that really matters is the most recent regime, the most recent deals on the table. That's
We're
the only thing that really
looking at
matters.
what I'm trying to is the history and the context of what has led us here. So we can talk about like solutions right now, but what I thought we were more here to talk about was just
Sorry, my bad. I forgot about the history thing. I thought
No,
we
it's
got
fine.
into the modern.
I mean, we
modern
could
shit
talk
at this
about
point.
both,
Sorry.
but history was the
and again with history, I'm really just concerned with like the 1940s onward, and I'm saying that at the around the Camp David Taba Summit era in the early 2000s, Israel was given a two-state solution that is the one that the UN has overwhelmingly voted for, that the US and Israel rejected, because it gave East Palestine, or I'm sorry, East Jerusalem to Palestinians, and Israel would not accept that, because they want the entire area. They want
do
all
you
of
have a source
Jerusalem.
for that too? Because my understanding is different, and I'm willing to look at
Yeah,
yours.
I can send you.
I
It's just
honestly don't know. It was my understanding that it's the Palestinians that are doing the rejecting.
I read the report for Camp David, the report for the Taba Summit. I read the Oslo report, and my understanding of this is that both sides have done things that very much muddy the waters. I know in the 2013 and 2014 peace talks, the United States official position was that both sides like royally ruined that talk. And there have been times when the Palestinians have rejected it, but it's called the UN. Hang on, UN Charter, or the UN Commission, something 181. And that is the partition that was proposed, and I forget the year. Originally, it was proposed in 1947. Okay.
Yeah.
And these are kind of the international borders that basically give the West Bank and the Gaza Strip to the Palestinians, and then Israel keeps everything else, and then they split Jerusalem.
But they have that now, don't they?
No, because Israel occupies the West Bank, and they control the borders of the Gaza Strip.
West Bank is more ambiguous to me, because I really don't know the details.
Okay, so the West Bank is
Hamas
the more dramatic history. That's the kind of the more complicated one. But because again, I'm not sure.
But the West Bank people are not like they have the Fatah government, which is willing to work with Israel and willing to acknowledge Israel's right to resist. So they're not the one that's fueling Hamas. So I guess that's why I haven't been focusing on West Bank, because they seem willing to be part of a solution. It's Gaza and Hamas specifically that's holding up the process.
Right. And I think that Hamas needs to probably just be eliminated in all honesty, because they're not doing any good for anybody. And they don't have the best interests of the Palestinian people at heart, because they're willing to.
I agree with that.
And that's kind of
Israel hasn't just made their
determine for themselves, right? If nations have the right to be self-determining.
Yeah, I don't think they have elections anymore, but I guess if they
Hamas.
wanted to like overthrow them with force, they could. But then like at the same time, again, I mean, Hamas is evil, but then they do all this like humanitarian stuff inside, makes the Gazans like them because they're really the main thing that they have. And so it just creates this complicated dynamic where it's just messy, because
that's kind of like the
they channel their
Narcos.
anger.
You've seen Narcos?
I haven't actually, no.
Okay. Well, the Colombian drug cartels were beloved by the people of Colombia because they gave them money and all this stuff constantly. Despite the fact they were a murderous drug cartel that literally was killing way more people than they were helping. And that's very similar to Hamas. I personally think that Israel should make it part of their charter to go in and remove Hamas. But that's going to be considered a military incursion anyway. But if they're already going to be bombing the city, I think they should go ahead and do it. They should take Hamas out entirely. They should kill them all. I mean, seriously. And I mean, no mercy. They should kill every member of Hamas and set up a new election and start over. Because, like, unless they do something like that, there's never going to be any chance for peace. The only other chance is nuclear extermination, and I don't want to see that happen. No one does.
Yeah, and I would be fine with that. The problem though is that I'm not sure if y'all have seen the maps of the 2 states Israel has
I
proposed.
think they should have a 3-state solution.
Who's the third state?
Gaza, West Bank,
Oh,
West
okay.
Bank.
Israel.
But you know what I think?
mean,
I think
really
they should have
hard
a
to have
one-state
2
solution.
states
I think
with no
I think
connection
Israel
between
should
them.
complain it all, make every Palestinian member, a citizen of Israel, give them all equal rights, and start fresh. That would be the best thing to do.
I don't think that would be workable. Not after all this.
Well, you know,
I
for all this.
support the Palestinians' right to be a self-determining state.
I think there is a
I think
psychological
there's
bonus
practical
to
logistic reasons to have 2 states because of the large separation between Gaza and the West Bank.
Yeah,
I think
I
as long as
Israel
there's a
would still
2-state
have-
or 3-state solution, there's always gonna be war. They're on
They
the
But
could-
what's
they're
the
too close.
incentive for the Palestinians to overthrow Hamas when they can look at all these rallies all across the world, like in Western cities
Supporting
like London
Hamas, I
and
know,
here in
it's
America?
retarded.
Well, because there are some insane online tanky lefties who support Hamas, and those people are fucking crazy. But
Like
the
Because they
majority,
see them as an
DSA.
analogous to our struggle against racism or whatever they see in the United States, because they're very similar. It's a very wokish position, despite the fact
Right, it's
that
the
Hamas hates gay
anti-imperialist,
people and trans
anti-capitalist
people and all that shit like that.
faction.
no, I mean
They see
to
a
me
punch
the
to the breast,
true
brown.
reasonable moral position that everybody on the left that I admire holds is to condemn Hamas and condemn the retaliatory actions of the IDF. Everybody
Are they
that I
condemning
admire on the
BLM
left.
and the DSA as well?
What?
Are they condemning BLM and the DSA as well, which
For-
came out
for-
with public statements of support for Hamas?
They would condemn any condoning of Hamas. Yes, of course.
Okay.
I follow like Destiny, Kyle Kalinske, David Pacman, Sam Cedar, Vosh. Those are
I
all my
don't
big
believe you
people.
about Sam Cedar, and I know you've taken him down before, but I don't believe Sam Cedar is condemning Hamas. I just don't believe it, not in his heart.
No,
I mean, these people unequivocally condemn the actions of Hamas, and they are who
They condemn the
I'd have to
actions of
see it with my
Hamas,
own
which is just the
eyes.
politically correct way of saying the. I'm sorry, you got to condemn that shit a lot more strongly than just being like, I completely don't condone the actions.
No,
of
I
this
mean
terrorist
they
organization.
pretty strongly. I mean, I can send you the video. I mean, Kyle Kalinske
I did
has
see
made
where David
so
Pacman
much.
came out and did.
Kyle Kalinske has talked extensively condemning Hamas in like a very emotional.
Yeah, but he spread a lot of misinformation about Israel too.
Kyle
and Crystal Ball, his wife, is also rather
extensive
soft.
videos breaking apart Kyle Kalinski's claims about Israel and debunking every single one.
Wait, which claims about Israel, like of the war right now or in the past?
No, and just in general, the disinformation that Kyle puts out about Israel and his ignorance.
What has Kyle said about Israel that's
I've
incorrect?
posted the videos several times. You can watch them. They're
Which video? Okay.
I'll watch it.
I'll post them now. I'll post 2 in particular, but he has a whole playlist.
Yeah, put it in the Discord.
Serpent? Serpent? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like him. He's good. He's really good.
And he is an Israeli that lives in Israel.
Yeah. Kyle Kalinske and Crystal Ball, they both say things. They play nice with modern politics by saying things like, we don't condemn any violence of this sort of thing. But they kind of they have this wink wink kind of attitude where you can tell they really do kind of support it.
Who, Kyle
because they see
Kalinske,
Israel
you
as
think
bad.
does that? I don't get that vibe from
And
Kyle.
his wife,
This
Crystal Ball.
Oh,
2
no,
videos
dude, come on.
Actual proof. You
Not
can
at
watch.
all.
He takes the sources are straight out of Kyle's. What is it? Anti-secular talk thing.
Can you post those in the
unless
Discord?
the videos
Because
are
I'm
lying
releasing
to
in the
me,
YouTube
unless
chat.
my own eyes are lying to me, then what Chris said is absolutely true. But if Kyle recently, because these are a few years old, if Kyle recently came out with something that different from his position in these videos, I would definitely be interested in taking a look at that because I can change my view on him as well.
Sure. And again, just to be fair, I can already see from this Kyle video that this was his background like pre-2015. I mean, so this is at least 8 years ago. So I don't know if he's had bad takes in the past. I began to watch Kyle in
Oh,
2018.
Kyle Kalinske having bad takes? I never have heard such a thing in all my years.
And I think he's
The
just
dude's a
ignorant. I
moron.
think Kyle
Kalinski's
believes
a
the
moron.
stuff he said. I just think he gets his sources kind of like Roenn from leftist biased sources. He doesn't get them from
No,
accurate
Kalinske
sources.
is a neocon at best.
But
he pretends to be a
the first
leftist, but he's really a
video-
By
neocon.
what? Okay, by what? I will defend Kyle to my
I don't think
dying
he's a
breath.
neocon.
To what
That's
end
not
is
a
he
hill to die on,
neocon?
Rowan. It's
I
not a
think
hill
he's
to
an
die, and
ignorant-
he's
I
not
think
worth
he's an
it, man.
ignorant leftist. He's a very biased leftist.
I think Kyle
He's
is
in a
one of the
he's in a
most
data bubble.
principled, accurate, substantive commentators I've ever seen in my life. I mean, anything that you present me, I mean, I will, you know.
Well, I don't know. These
I
videos.
would take Sam Cedar David Packman over Kyle Kalinske. Kyle Kalinske is a fucking moron. I hate that guy. I don't say
I
that about
find
many
his take
people.
super consistent
But-
and like very common sense. Like
He's
him, like,
one of the
condemning the activists
smuggest of all the
unequivocally.
smug liberals in the business.
Are we
I
thinking
can't
of the
stand
same
Patty
it.
said
person,
she's been
Chris?
through
Kyle
all these
Kalinske, the guy
people's
that married
channels.
Crystal
What
Ball
is-
from Rising and Breaking Points. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know the guy.
I think Kyle comes across as one of the most kind, genuine, good faith commentators. I mean,
I think he's genuine. I think he's
the
just
person
ignorant.
that brought me over to the left from being a conservative. I found him so good faith and genuine. So I
think
I have a
Paul is
totally
genuine
different
too, but
perception of him.
I think there are people. I think there's some ignorance that they're.
He's one of the
depending
people
on
that
their
push me
sources,
further to the right.
They're swallowing some misinformation. I'm not questioning their motives or their character. I'm just questioning their sources, their input.
I mean,
I can't-
what?
I can't remember what video it was now, but he did a series of videos back, I don't know, 2-3 years ago that I found so disingenuous and so bad faith that it really pushed me further to the right than I had been a long time.
Do you remember what the topic was?
I don't remember now. It's been 3 years ago.
That's
I
fine.
remember
I'd be
I'd have to go back
curious.
and look. I could look into my
Yeah.
YouTube history from 3 years ago and see what I could find, but it would take me a while.
Again, just if y'all can give me concrete examples, and I'll watch the videos, Jeff.
I
but
just
if,
post 2 videos. There's chock full of concrete.
I just said I'll watch them.
But the first one,
But just
the first one is
off the top of your
older,
head,
and then the second one I posted, he goes back and revisits Kyle a few years later to see if he's changed his position. So that the second one is from the newer. You talked about the background being older. So he deliberately goes back and revisits Kyle to see how his positions have changed and critiques the new positions as well. Patty says Sam over David.
2019.
I don't know. I kind of like David. Of all of them, I think David's probably the one I can tolerate the most.
Yeah, David's the one I can tolerate the most too.
I mean, I just know that on this conflict, he's unequivocally condemned the actions of Hamas.
Yeah, I saw the video.
So I don't know.
David seems more like a person to me. Sam and Kyle seem like they're just like goatees with a person attached. I don't know. I don't trust them.
Sure. Well, and just real quick. So here's the other thing, Jeff, is it's like you can say that my sources have a left-wing bias all you want, but you know that there's no such thing as an unbiased source. And that might be true of my sources too. I mean, although I read the UN official report, so if they have a left-wing bias, so be it. But I think I wouldn't be so quick to say that if you weren't even aware of the laws on the books that Israel had in
I'm
the
still waiting for you to
treatment
show
of Palestinians, your sources clearly have a very right-wing bias.
Here's the problem. I can't find a source for those laws. I'm not looking at any source that shows me those laws. So it's not like I'm looking at a source that's showing me the laws but framing them differently. I'm not finding them. So if they're out there,
I'll send you
the actual laws themselves would be the most primary.
I'll send you the primary sources. I can find them. It'll take me a while, but I can track down the Israel legal. I don't know, in their history of court documents or something.
And like I said, I've been using Encyclopedia Britannica. I've been using History.com. I like to use primary documents like laws, court rulings, bills, stuff like that are part of the public record. I go to those first, and then
same.
I'll do commentary from scholars, people that have studied the topic, trusted commentators. and then I'll do like just political pundits. That's like
Yeah,
my
I
third or
mean,
fourth range of
do
sources.
you absorb like do you seek out counter arguments to your own positions?
I do.
I look at a
I
range
personally,
of
I
sources,
wasn't
and
that.
many different arguments trickle in from that. So I don't reject any sort, and then I
Okay.
kind of weigh them all together. So I don't necessarily seek them out, but I don't really have to because they find their way to me anyway because I
Okay,
have
so I
such a
would just
broad
say
range of
that
sources.
the way that I have found that the way that I do research now that has given me, I think, a decent grasp on the arguments and most issues that I talk with people about is that I try to actively refute my own positions, like pretty actively. So if I think that I believe something, I'll go to like I have gone to the most pro-Israel Israel.gov shit to be like, what is the most biased thing that I can possibly read, and then find ways to then counter that. And I try to, if you seek out the things that are hard, like left and right, and like they fight each other, usually the truth is kind of left after the battle of the two most biased sources. That's kind of how I try to do it. But
I
there's
kind
always
of tend to find.
perspectives that
I do
I
something
don't find that
similar.
it really
It's
works that well
less
using the two
formal.
extreme sides. I think it's better to find the two moderate sides on either side. I think you'll find better results of finding the truth that way.
yeah.
Honestly,
I mean,
because like the
I
ones
try
that
to
are more
find them all,
mainstream.
but
Yeah, I do
know.
too. But at the same time, extremist opinions can be beyond extreme in venturing into crazy.
They
And
can,
crazy
but like,
means
so
money's the
what I
problem.
mean, for example, is like I will read Israel's official like reports on stuff or their perspective, their government statements, because that's going to be, there is no more pro Israel bias than their own government, right? So that's like the one example. And then
That's
I'll
not
read,
necessarily true. There are definitely more pro-Israel biases than just their own government. There are people that literally do want the extermination of all Arabs. They want to wipe out Gaza. They want to wipe out the West Bank. There are those opinions. They
well,
exist.
sure, yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess I just consider their government like the pretty solid, like any really like, even if there is a reasonable argument to be made for them, it'll probably be there, I would think. And then I will try to kind of debunk that and find, okay, well, like what are the, the possible counter arguments to this that, that also exist.
Have
But
you found government documents that call for the extermination of Palestinians and taking
no,
the whole
none that
all the
call for
land?
their exterminate. No.
Okay, because I haven't either, but I've seen the Hamas charter.
Yeah, no, I don't think, no, there's nothing in the Israel official government that wants to kill all Palestinians. That doesn't exist, I don't think. And I just, the only thing that I'm claiming is their occupation of these areas was unjust, and the second set of laws was unjust, which I will find those sources for you. But even just them being there and occupying it militarily in the first place, I think it's not justified. And from that, Palestinians have been
So you don't
radicalized.
think they should be there at all, or you said you support their right to be there if they stay within certain boundaries, or you don't think
Sure,
they
I
should be
just
there at all?
think that if I support Israel's right to defend itself, but that requires them to clarify where their boundaries are, because they've just expanded and expanded every chance they got, both in whenever they were established in 1948, whenever they seized the territory in 1967, and after that, going more and more and more into the West Bank, more and more and more into Gaza, building more and more military. What is even the word? Just military areas, Israeli neighborhoods, kicking out Palestinians. It's on record. I mean,
But how do you explain all the land? Because they had way more land than they do now. How do you explain all the land they gave back if they've done nothing but expand and expand and expand?
help me
And how do you
understand that.
account
When
for?
did they have more than they have right now?
At one time, they had most of the whole area after the war, after they won it in those wars, and they gave the West Bank back. They tried to give Gaza and the West Bank back to Jordan and Egypt, and they didn't want it, so they gave it back to the Palestinians.
Well, I
But
don't think
at one time, they had
they
Gaza, they
didn't
had
give the
they had all
land
of it.
back. They just allowed them to stay in the land that was already
No,
theirs, right? I
no, they
mean,
gave it. They ceded it back to them in return for peace, as part of the negotiations for peace.
when you say they ceded it back, you mean they took it over. They
Do you
were like,
think
okay,
Israel
we'll
owns
only stay in
Gaza
part
and
of
the
these
West
areas.
Bank right now?
Huh?
Do you think Israel owns Gaza and the West Bank right now?
Not Gaza. I mean, so whenever you say own, that's complicated because they don't own Gaza. They do control many aspects of Gaza, like they control their sea to the west and they control their airspace, etc. But with the West Bank, yeah, Israel occupies most of the West Bank.
But it used to occupy way more of it, and Gaza.
I don't think no. I mean
Well,
they've only moved in and taken more land in
then see,
those.
that's what I'm saying. Your sources are not giving you accurate information.
Why do you think that mine are wrong then?
If you think that Israel has continuously expanded and has never reduced its amount of land and given it back to the
No, I'm
Palestinians,
sure. I
they are
mean,
telling you wrong.
there have been small concessions where they've given like a pittance back to these
They've won
people
land in
as
war
they
that they have
expand.
given back, not just a pittance. They've given it back in return for peace. They don't want all of the land. They're willing to let the Palestinians have some of it. So if your sources are telling you that Israel is just this imperialistic colonizer
Okay.
that wants to expand, and drive the Palestinians completely out of the area, it is giving you
Yeah.
false information.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if your definition, I think it's a messed up definition of Israel has given back land to Palestinians. If you say that, so they didn't control the West Bank, and then they took over a bunch of parts of it, and then with the Oslo Accords gave like a little bit of it back to the Palestinians, but they still took over a big chunk of it. And you consider that giving land back? I don't. I consider that
I
expansion.
consider they have land, they have a whole bunch of land, and then they have less of it because some of it went back to the Palestinians. I consider that a refutation of your
Okay,
claim that
but
Israel
Jeff,
continues to expand and
I
has not
I
given any
think
of the
you're
land
ignoring
back.
the part where they took that land in the first place, though.
As a result of war, which is legitimate.
No, I don't think it
Well,
is.
you
That's where we
disagree
just
on
don't
that, but
agree.
I don't. We just disagree on that point. If you're
Because
doing
you
an
can just call
Excel map,
anything. I
that's
mean,
going to be one of our
any
points.
conflict is a war, right? Like anytime you have a conflict with a country and you can just take their land, and then you think that by just calling it a war that justifies that.
Well, these were actual war. It's not just me calling it a war.
Is any
These fit the
war ever
definition of
justified then, Roenn?
war.
Is
Britain
any
did it
war
with
ever
the
moral?
It
Ottoman Empire.
depends. It
Israel
depends.
did it twice in the War for Independence. We did
Yeah,
it
but
with the American Revolution and
that's
our wars.
right.
Like this is the norm for every nation that
Yeah,
goes to
that's
war
what I
for an
have
enemy.
the problem with, though, is that taking of land by force and then saying, well, we took it, so it's mine now. Go fuck yourself. That's what I don't like. I don't like that process. That's
But
And
that's
some of
reality.
the land
That's
well, you may
reality.
not like it, but it's not unique to Israel. And some of the land they
Yeah.
took, they even gave back, which is rather more rare.
Should we give back all the land in the United States to the Native Americans?
a very good question. I mean,
Well, what's your answer?
I pose that question to people. I don't know because I don't know how many hundreds of years have to go by until you just do an evil again by
What's your
kicking.
gut reaction?
We
What's your
give
gut
some of it.
reaction?
We have reservations and casinos.
Sure, no, but that's not the same thing. You could call that an apartheid state if you wanted to.
Yeah.
If you can call Gaza an apartheid state, which I don't, you could call what we're doing with the Native Americans apartheid. I'm just asking you, what's your gut reaction? Should we just give all our land back to the Native Americans?
No, because now there's people that are settled on it and have their lives who would
Exactly.
suffer
Same
if you
reason we
take
shouldn't
them
like
off of
ship
it.
all black people back to Africa, right?
Right. I
I
don't
mean,
think that we should do
because
that
the
either.
way things are now is the way things are now. We have to deal with from here, not
Exactly.
based on what happened 100 years ago or even 50 years ago. We have to deal with what we have right now.
I
And
agree.
that's where I think that there's just who cares at this. It doesn't really matter that Israel took the land and gave it back and all this stuff. We have to deal with what it is right now.
Okay. So if we're talking about right now, I think that Israel should withdraw all of its military occupation out of the West Bank. That's what I think should happen. That's what the UN thinks should happen. That's what America thinks should happen. That's what Bill Clinton proposed. That's what Arafat proposed. That's what the UN Proposition 181 proposed. That's what everybody has proposed. And Israel has said no every single time that they will not accept that solution.
I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm just, what does that have to do with Gaza and Hamas?
I mean, we're talking about
does that legitimize anything happening in Gaza?
I think no. I mean, whenever you say legitimize, it doesn't. If you mean justify, no. But I'm saying that it all contributes to the Palestinian resentment. That's what I'm saying. The reason that Hamas exists, the reason
I
why
don't
this stuff is
care about.
happening.
There's no level of resentment that rises to the terrorism that we've seen.
I agree, and would you also say that there's no level of resentment that justifies what Israel has done to Gaza in the past week and a half?
What have they done?
They've
They
carpet
haven't
bombed
even
it with
flattened it
6,000
yet.
bombs in 5 days. Now that number is certainly probably closer to over 10,000. I mean, do
I
you
don't
think
have a
that that
problem with. I don't have a problem considering what Hamas did to Israel. I don't have a problem with that. That's where I think our
okay? So
moral
then I guess
foundation
that's
are
the
different.
disconnect.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
what
mean,
Hamas did was much more targeted, much more personal. You can argue there's something to be said for a action like that taken by a military when it's clearly not personal. It's clearly not being like targeted
I
in
think
that
it's pretty
sense because it
personal at
is
this
so
point.
wide.
I think it's
It
pretty
is,
personal.
but
Like,
the military aspect of it kind of gives it an air of detachment to it that whenever you do something like what Hamas did, you're doing something much
yeah.
more.
It's a military
To use
response,
to
and
use a
I
different name.
adjust my
yeah,
reaction
Right. It's like it's
accordingly.
almost intimate. It's
I
a more intimate kind of killing. I mean, it's much more. It's much more conscious and much more specific. Walking up to each individual civilian and pulling a trigger is, in a lot of ways, I think, a lot worse than carpet bombing the city.
well, I mean, if you're talking about judging the individual people that did it, yeah, I would say that the type of person that would go in and like murder babies like
But what
that,
about all the people that support that? Look at the friggin' memes on the internet of like making like
that's evil too.
the
Y'all are acting
parachute.
like I'm trying to justify
I'm
Hamas,
just
and
saying,
I'm
but there's
not.
clearly the mentality that you have does feed into that. There's
I
like
don't think
there's
it.
a
No, not
feeling
at all.
of
Because
it's
because
okay to feel this way.
no. Because if you're a normal, reasonable human being, you can condemn what Hamas did and also want autonomy for the Palestinian people. And you can
I
look at the
do.
evil done on both sides and you can condemn it both, which is what I am trying to do. And I can also say, to be fair, if you want me to, I can do the other side too and say that I understand the Israeli resentment and rage Palestinians, and I get the people of Israel seeing what Hamas did and their gut reaction to want to go level Gaza. I mean, the officials in Israeli government have said that there are no innocent Gazans, that they're all
I
I
culpable.
disagree with
disagree
it.
with that. That's
I do
some
He
official.
vehemently disagree
Some
with it.
official.
verbatim
One
said
guy
that.
said that.
He
One guy said.
verbatim, yeah.
I don't agree with him.
He was a very high-ranking Israeli official, to be fair, and I
I
do
still
condemn
don't
that
agree
statement
with him.
unequivocally.
We've had
In
politicians
okay,
here
so
say
so
some dumb, ignorant shit
Sure.
that I don't
In
understand.
2019, Netanyahu said that Israel is not a state of all of its citizens, but rather the nation state of the Jewish people and only the Jewish
None
people.
of that changes my reaction to
Okay, I mean that's
recent
fine, but
events
I
at
just,
all.
I think that if you look at the IDF's response, I think if you I think that a reasonable moral person should condemn their response to Gaza as well as indiscriminate carpet bombing of a tiny, tiny area that has resulted in thousands of innocent civilian deaths so far, half of which are children under 15 years old. I think it's evil and it should be condemned just as strongly as what Hamas did. I do not see a moral
I don't
justification in
think it's
not.
evil. I think it's a military response.
Yeah,
And I
it's yeah,
don't see
it's
it as
well,
equivalent to
and
what
so what Hamas did, you could argue is a military response to the Israeli treatment
I don't. It's
I
terrorism.
mean,
I can distinguish terrorism from a military response. It's not that ambiguous to me.
you think that if so, you think I mean, is any response appropriate then to kill 3,000 innocent civilians
There is something to be
by
said
bombing? Do
for
you
like,
think
okay,
that's just fine? I'm not
let's look at like it from a
understanding.
sci-fi standpoint, okay? There's a big difference between a human being going into a crowd of people and gunning down civilians than if RoboCop did it. You know, RoboCop that just has or a Terminator. It's programmed to kill people. It's indiscriminate. It doesn't see a difference between a baby and an 80-year-old man. It sees no difference between these things. It sees human life signs and exterminates them. That's what a bomb
Mhm.
is. You
Right.
know, and I understand that it's horrific no matter what, But to send in actual paratroopers into that and killing people at a music festival, these aren't. This is it's a much different. It's striking. It's a terrorism. It literally is trying to strike
Yeah.
terror. It's trying to create the and that what Israel did. They said, okay, you did this. Now we're going to do this, and they gave them
Yeah.
warning. And me, personally, I don't even know if they should give them warning
Yeah, it's
because
listen.
it gave the
So
Hamas members a
I get it. I get it.
Carpet,
To me,
the carpet bombing.
it is punishment of an entire population of people based on the acts of their government. I think it's
That
unjustified.
happens
War
in
is.
war. It's happened for
That's what happens
thousands.
in
Like
war.
that. There's nothing unique about that. Is
Yeah,
maybe
I agree.
I
It's
hate
not
it, but it
unique,
is
but I
war
think
that you're
it is
facing.
contemptible and it should be condemned. That's my position on it.
I do
don't
So
hate
think
it.
your position
It is
is coming
contemptible, but
from a
it's still
position of
reality.
idealism about human history and about human nature. It's not specific to this event. And I'm interested when you take that moral foundations test. Let me know your results because I'm going to tell you on the care axis they rate it from 1 to 5. The average person is at a 3.7. I'm at a 3. So I am lower in care than you may be. So I'd be interested to see your number after taking this test because we
Yeah.
just have different evolutionary foundations when it comes to this. And it doesn't make either one of us evil, I don't think.
I mean, yeah, I guess. I mean, we are just different in our moral judgments. I guess. I just.
Right.
I fail to see a moral justification in doing this because then you could just as easily say that if any terrorist group from a country commits an act of terrorism and even kills like 50 people, that you are then giving that victim country the justification to turn around and do that same thing 1,000 times over to the other
We
country. And
did
I
that
just don't
with Pearl
think.
Harbor. We did that with Pearl Harbor.
Well, because that was a country that was trying to dominate the world alongside Germany as an Axis power. That was an aggressive force that declared war upon us that we then fought. I don't, and you know,
Hamas's action
to be
was
fair, I don't think
fall
that
in
we
that
should have dropped the
category.
nukes on Japan. I think that was a bad call.
Even
I'm
though
not a numbers
it's
consequentialist.
very arguable, we'll never know. But it's very arguable that we saved more lives than we destroyed by dropping
It
those
might be.
bombs.
It might
Because
be.
we
Those
did in the war a
counterfactuals
lot.
are interesting.
If
but
not
yeah.
for us dropping those bombs, the war could have gone on another 10 years and taken many, many more lives.
I've heard
And
that. I've also heard that the Japanese officials were already open to surrendering prior to us dropping the bombs. I don't know
I'm not
exactly
talking
how
about
that
our
would
war
have
with
gone.
Japan. I'm talking about World War II. I'm talking about Germany's ongoing. Now, I understand that Germany fucked up and tried to invade Russia, and that's the main reason that Germany lost. But
Right.
still, the fact that we dropped the bombs when we did certainly demoralized the other side to the point where they were like, "Yeah, this isn't going to happen." And I mean, seriously, like after the nuclear bomb was unveiled or unleashed in that sense and people saw what it could do, it was like, well, we're fucked, we can't keep going. And so
Yeah.
I'm
No,
saying, like,
I agree.
I completely feel the same way. It's horrific what we did to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but when you look at it from this perspective, from with the perspective of hindsight, you can totally see that that was probably the right thing to do, even though I feel terrible about it. That's the thing that sucks. That's the reason I'm glad I'm never going into politics, and I would never want to be in those positions.
Yeah.
I would never want to be in the position to have to make the decision to drop bombs on a bunch of innocent people in order to save millions of more lives. That's fucking horrific. It's the trolley problem taken to an nth extreme. But nonetheless, that's what people have to deal with, and it's not me.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, okay. So then I guess I just wonder. And again, so it's hard to talk to both y'all at once because y'all don't quite have the same position, right? So am I clear? So I understand Jeff's take that he thinks that what the IDF has done as a response is totally fine. He doesn't really have like any objection.
I'm more in the center. Yes, this is a
Yeah,
far
I'm the
one
cold-hearted
direction center
Satanist.
leftist argument. Yes.
So Chris,
That's
so
right.
would you also take IDF has done, or do you think that it's okay given the circumstances?
I think it's very complicated, and ultimately, I do fall on the side of Israel's. I think that what they're doing, honestly, I seriously wonder, despite that, if it goes against my moral instincts that I have, my pragmatic side that sees Jeff's argument entirely and thinks that it's valid as well. I completely wonder whether or not they shouldn't be doing a lot more, a lot harsher.
I
There's
think
a
they've
part of
shown
me
a lot of
that
restraint
wonders if they shouldn't just fucking nuke the
and
place in order
humanitarian.
to prevent any further shit like this. It's just God's sake, so we can stop hearing about Israel-Palestine for the rest of our goddamn lives. I mean, I'm fucking sick of it, man. I mean, I'm not saying that's literally a reason to drop bombs. I'm being hyperbolic for humor, but I'm saying like my moral instincts make me hurt for those people, but I almost wonder if it wouldn't be a better choice to just actually truly wipe out Hamas, wipe out any of the sentiment. But how do you do that without creating a bunch of new radicals? How do you do that with creating your next Bin Laden or Hamas or whatever? You know, every time you do this shit, you create more radicalized individuals that are just going to cling even harder to those religious ideals that cause this shit in the first place. So the cycle starts over.
Yeah,
So
just
the
like
only real solution is to wipe them out, and I hate that. But from a pragmatic standpoint, if I was playing this as a video game, if I'm playing Civilization or something like that,
sure.
and I'm
And if
looking at
human
this,
life has no value and it's purely
yeah,
a consequentialist framework. Sure.
that's the. But no, even human life is a value. If you have that foresight, that fourth dimensional perspective, where you can see the outcomes and things like that, it seems like more times than not, it's better to commit the genocide. And I fucking hate it, but it's the pragmatic viewpoint. I don't know. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I'm glad I'm not in those positions because
Yeah.
I don't have to make those kind of decisions, and I wouldn't want to. I
Then
don't
would y'all
pity
say
any.
that
I
y'all
don't
are
envy anybody in those
are y'all
situations.
moral consequentialists then?
I don't know what I am.
Okay. Jeff?
I think less so than you are. I think a lot of your criticisms are coming from this utopianism that's never actually existed on
why is
Earth.
it utopian to say that I don't want civilians to be carpet bombed? Why is that a utopian thing to condemn the act of excessive civilian deaths?
Because that's what happens in war. And
So are we never allowed to object to
you're not
civilian deaths
criticizing
in war then?
from a realistic perspective. You're criticizing from an ideal. Like, I want a war where nobody dies except the guilty.
No, I want
It's a
to
valid
minimize it.
criticism, but it's not a realistic
No, I'm
criticism.
a pragmatist too, Jeff. I'm not saying zero civilian deaths. I'm saying that we need to minimize them, and Israel is absolutely not minimizing.
I think Israel has minimized them compared to what they could have done.
What did they need 6,000 bombs for? What did they do with the 6,000 bombs? Oh, hang on. Give me just a moment.
Sure, we can get Canucks take while you're going. Hey, John.
Hi guys, I don't have a take. I'm just watching.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. We dedicated this show to Israel.
I may raise my hand by unmuting. You know, you'll kind of notice if I'm unmuted, it might mean
just like us. Just grab the mic and jump in, whatever you want.
Yeah,
that's what we've been doing.
Yeah, I certainly I'm not obeying any laws of politeness today. So
no, there's no civility here.
Me and Roenn seem to get into it pretty healthily, though. I don't think it's.
You have to.
Like, you have to. Yeah.
If we didn't, it'd be one of us talking the whole time.
There's always room for civility. I think modeling it and
civility is cultural too, and you up in Canada.
Trust me. Well, that sounds terrible. If I didn't cultivate a sense of civility, I'd probably be in prison for aggravated assault and bodily harm and attempted murder. I'm not joking. I'm not exaggerating. I cultivate a sense of civility because it's the only thing that allows me to live in civilization.
So it's more for you than for others.
No, it's for everyone around me because there are people.
But everyone that has to be on the same code of civility for that to work. And where I come from, we have a completely different code of civility.
It's not everyone, but I mean, I have pets that I love. I have an elder relative I have to take care of. I myself also don't want to end up in pound me in the ass prison. You know, that often tends to be
don't end up in
a very bad place. So civility and rules against violence and whatnot, they have their place. But
oh yeah, I'm definitely anti-violence.
Well, I'm not anti-violence.
That's
violence. No.
Violence is a very, very last resort to me.
I prefer it to be last, but if you can't be civil with someone and you have an
just
irresolvable conflict, then it defaults to violence, which is
leave them alone. or
Not
use the legal system.
not my favorite. Well, most people are not financially equipped to engage in lawfare. That's one of the ways the old nobles and it's an element of class warfare. Most people don't have the resources to engage in lawfare, so it's
Or
one
use
more way.
Machiavellianism.
That also ends up in prison. I'll hush. You guys go back to it.
I
Hello.
want to see this whatever Chris is sharing. Let's see.
Oh, I was taking the introductory year morals quiz.
Oh, is there a particular? Is this the question you wanted to?
Oh, I don't know. I was just I
Okay.
figured
You were
I
just
share
showing
the
us-
screen up in case anybody wanted to see it. It's not important. You can take it
Now I
down
have
if
to
you
figure
want.
out how to unshare. Hang on.
Economic
I can
issue.
say it. Stop sharing. There you go.
Yeah.
Done.
But yeah, I mean, I guess just kind of to circle back, that's fine, Jeff, if we just have like an irreconcilable moral difference. But I am kind of surprised because you've always kind of accused me of being a consequentialist, but it seems like you're taking.
I've never used. That's not a word I would use.
Are you sure? Or I feel like you've called me a consequentialist or a utilitarian a
That
few
comes
times.
from. I didn't even start hearing it until I
You
started.
sure? Okay, then I guess that wasn't you. But it just seems like you're taking a very kind of hard numbers utilitarian approach to like the ethics of war here. And I mean
taking
that's
a realistic approach based on
the
how
realistic
wars have
approach,
always
though?
been.
I mean, it's not
conducted.
like we
Not
have
necessarily
influence over what
utilitarian.
happens, Jeff. So in these conversations between people like us that have no influence on anything, we're not. I mean, we're talking about what we want to have happen. Nothing we say in this conversation, like Chris said, is going to matter. So it's like we're only here to talk about what we want to see happen and what we wish these governments would do. So you can say that I'm being idealistic, but I mean, yeah, so I'm talking about what I want to happen. If that's idealism, that's fine.
Yeah.
And what I want to happen is for Israel to not indiscriminately kill, again, over 3,000 civilian deaths at this point, way more than what Hamas did to Israel, and they're just the same. They're just the same now, and
I would like that too, and I think Israel has more or less, like, I'm satisfied with Israel attempt to meet those requirements so far. We're just drawing the lines in different places.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess they're just kind of arbitrary lines. Morality is arbitrary. So
like when I put the terrorism of Hamas next to the military response in defense or in reaction to it, the scales are like this to me. They're not even close.
Even though the numbers are over double what they took right now. Okay, so the numbers aren't really the thing.
So I guess it's not strictly utilitarian.
What are the things that matter to you then if it's not the numbers? Is it who dies? Because they're both civilians dying.
It's that Hamas is a terrorist, genocidal organization, and Israel is an enlightened Western liberal democracy that reflects more of my values than Hamas ever could.
Right. But what about the people?
I have a hard time mustering sympathy for terror. I just don't it doesn't pull my compassion strings at all. So, I don't see them as innocent little.
I will argue. I will clarify this for the 7th time, Jeff. I have never said that I have sympathy for Hamas. I've never justified the acts of Hamas. I'm talking about the civilian.
You have said that over. I recognize that. You have never said that. You have said the opposite over and over. You've been very clear about that.
Then why do you keep saying that you
I'm talking about me. I'm not saying by me saying I don't have sympathy for therapists that you're saying that you do. Don't make that connection.
Okay, well, that sounds like it's what you're saying whenever you say that you don't have. Okay.
I'm saying I don't have. When I look at the situation, I have a hard time feeling the feelings that you seem to be feeling about.
Okay, but so then you are saying it, Jeff, and I don't have that. I don't have sympathy for terror.
You have sympathy or compassion for something.
For civilians, not for terrorists.
Well, I don't know where Hamas ends and civilians begin. So again, we're like, where do we draw the line? We're back to where we draw the line in different places.
I don't think if you're a child, I don't think you're culpable for what terrorists in your country do.
I'm not for children suffering anything, but I do know that happens in war. Right. So I've kind of carved that out as a.
Here's an interesting question.
Realistic consequence.
I don't see many people talking about. Hamas is generally portrayed by both right-leaning and left-leaning media as being more or less like a terrorist cell that exists in Gaza, but they were the elected government. So are they not like the people that actually fill their governmental offices and such like that?
They are. They're a
They are.
full-on government.
Okay.
And
So-
they have
So
spokespeople.
waging
and
war against Hamas is waging war against Gaza. Those are not separable things.
Yeah,
Just
I
like
mean,
if someone
it's-
wages war against Trump's presidency or Biden's presidency, they'd be waging war against the United States.
yeah, it is the government of Gaza.
So
Yes.
it wasn't just like some terrorist strike. That was an official war instigation from Gaza to Israel. There's no
Yes.
way around that.
Yes.
Okay. So that's the first. I'm glad we're saying this because it's never been clarified for me.
Then sympathy for Gaza. I won't even say Hamas. I have a hard time having sympathy and compassion for Gaza.
That's okay. That's the interesting point then.
And you
Can
seem to have
help me
more
understand
for
that?
Gaza than I do, because you see Gaza differently than I do.
Help me understand that more. What do you mean by that?
I don't see Gaza as an innocent actor or as a victim. And my compassion is reserved for people that are in situations through no fault of their own. They're on the end of some kind of suffering. I don't see Gaza is responsible for what's happening to Gaza right now. They had the agency to carry out the unprovoked attack on Israel, and now they're reaping the consequences of that.
So the first thing that comes to my mind whenever you say that is whenever you say Gaza, you are like abstracting out, like Gaza is an abstract concept. It's a country, and you're taking the 2 million people that live in Gaza, and the one thing that they have in common is that they're Gazan. So you're treating Gaza as this collective little entity that rains down upon every citizen. I wouldn't.
Chris said,
So
and I'm just going off of that.
What if? Wait. Sorry. Say that again.
You just agreed with what Chris said, so that's why I changed it to Gaza, because
what did I agree with
about this being an attack from Gaza, from the country or territory of Gaza. So we
Jeff,
switched to Hamas to Gaza,
but it's Hamas that did the attack, and now it's Gazan citizens.
But Chris said that Hamas is inseparable from Gaza, and you agreed. So
I'm not inseparable. I'm saying that they're the government of the geographic location of Gaza in the same way that the U.S. government is our government. But if our government commits acts of terrorism in the world, which Lord knows that the U.S. government has many a time throughout the 20th century, and we've backed many coups, we've kicked out democratically elected leaders in countries and installed dictators, okay? Our government doing that does not justify that country that got couped sending over bombs or doing a 9/11 and killing American civilians. I don't think that justifies that, but that's the logic that you're using.
I mean, I don't think it necessarily there's any
I think
justification
Israel's
for any of that stuff. But
we haven't
if they
done
did, I
anything
would guess I would understand if we committed an act of war against their country and they attacked and they retaliated, it would be expected.
I have an important point to bring up that maybe has not been brought up so far.
What's up, John?
Hi. Here in the West, we consider ourselves to be a civilization that separates church and state. We have, to one degree or another, enshrined that within the rules of our civilizations. We are a post-Enlightenment civilization. Are we better or worse? No, we're different. Now, I happen to think that separation of church and state is fantastic. I quite like it because it allows a plurality of peoples to coexist relatively peacefully. We have mechanisms that clearly state don't always work, but at least a flag has been raised regarding that. Now, if we look at that part of the world in which the conflict between Israel and Palestine is happening, the Levant, they are not a post-Enlightenment civilization like Europe is. They have religions and political systems. Their civilizations have a much deeper relationship between politics and religion, in particular Islam. In Islam, the separation of politics and religion is not possible. It is as tightly wound as DNA is. They are one and the same. So we are trying to map our moral axioms and understand from our moral axioms what is happening in a world, a civilization, a part of the world with two civilizations or elements of those civilizations that do not share that axiomatic foundation. Unless we can start from that point, it's going to be counterproductive not to acknowledge that. We can't map Western morals, Judeo-Christian morals, onto two warring, blood-feuding tribes with deeply held convictions in their Bronze Age religions.
Well, I mean, I think we do apply our morality to other people because whenever we judge the world, we're judging it through the filter of our subjective perception. So I don't know that there's a way to separate. Like, how do you, if you're going to give your opinion or your take on something, how do you not filter your values of that perception through your own mind? Like, what do you mean? Like, of course, I'm going to use my values to appraise things because I'm me speaking. Like, what is the alternative?
The alternative is not to waste our own, like, if we're talking about in an ideal world, what would be great, we can, intellectually masturbate all day long about that. But we as outsiders, right, as Western outsiders for the most part, we are literally incapable of understanding why the cycle of violence. Why don't they just stop? Why doesn't just someone stand up and forgive or not continue the cycle of violence? It's not our fight. It's not our civilization. And unless we are willing to go in there and make them behave with all of the connotations that would imply, is it even our place to do it? Insofar as we're going to be affected by what happens there, we've got to think, are we willing to spend our own blood and treasure yet again to impose peace on two warring groups of human beings that don't really want peace? They want the other side eliminated. Now, not every single person on that side. As a whole, if I had to give very gross definitions or depictions of what's going on, to me, that's what I see. We're trying to moralize two people down in the mud fighting who have no intention of letting the other one ever stand back up because they know that will allow the cycle of violence to continue. It's an Ouroboros, a worm eating its tail, a snake eating its tail of violence. It won't ever end so long as their leaders and their radicals and they're just it's not going to end because of anything we do. The one or other side has to have a clear and dominant finale to these hostilities. It's probably not going to happen in my lifetime or the next few lifetimes. And if nukes are used, that's when we'll see a wider cycle of violence begin. That's why we should be concerned. But I'm also talking now as if there aren't a whole host of other interests involved. Geopolitics, business. It's not a clean conflict. It's not a clean conflict. There's no moral solution to this. If there was a moral solution, it would have been reached long before now. There's no moral solution to this.
I mean,
cycle of atrocity can only. I'll just finish with this. I think after 4+ decades as an adult, a cycle of atrocity this steeped in blood and religion and hatred can only end when the other party, whoever ends up victorious, expires and cannot continue the fight into the next generation.
Wait, say that last part again.
A fight like this doesn't end until there's no more fight left to happen. Both sides expire at each other's throats, or there's one clear and dominant winner. That's what I see happening.
I do too.
Yeah, I mean that's entirely possible.
Well,
I mean, I think I mean, peace is possible. It's not likely. I mean, we came close after the Taba summit. That was the closest that they ever came, and then Sharon gave that up. So I mean, that sucks. I mean, I think it's worth trying. I think, but I mean, yeah,
I can guarantee you why there will never, ever, 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 until the sun burns into a cinder, any peace possible between extremist Islamists, not Muslims, but extremist Islamists and extremist Jews. I can tell you exactly why. Human nature and extremism. It will never end until there's a definitive victor.
Well, sure. I mean, yeah, that's probably true. But I guess if we're just going to fight till the end of time, then I guess we should try to make things as good as possible while we can. I don't know.
I mean, what would be
We can
better?
all agree
What's
we don't want
go ahead.
nukes,
Go ahead.
right?
Yeah, I was just going to chime in really quick. So last night I was listening to this one rabbi talk about the conflict, and he was basically saying that Hashem commands that we are to like wipe all our enemies off the face of the earth. And he gave an example of an IDF soldier showing mercy on some children, and then those children later grew up to be terrorists. Now, I don't agree with everything that guy was saying, but I understand where he was coming from.
Yeah, that happens. I mean, the guy that didn't kill Hitler in World War One allowed, eventually let Hitler come to power. I guess you never know what the long-term consequences of those actions of compassion are going to be later.
I think the
But that's
point
the
in
thing.
that story is that you can know the consequences of some of those actions. A lot of times, that is what's going to happen. You're going to end up radicalizing people. I think there's something to be said, even though it makes my heart hurt. It's something to be said for finishing the job, like the thing from Breaking Bad, like the no half measure shit. You know, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Let me
It's one of those impossible conundrums, really.
let
Yeah, I
me ask
wasn't
a
going to be
question
on here
then,
for
just
long because I got to leave soon, but
yeah.
I was also just going to say one more thing is like in the Torah, when Hashem commanded them to, wipe out their enemies, something like that can't really happen today because like back then when that was written, you didn't have like international courts, you didn't have the United Nations, you didn't have like anything that we have today where we can see like videos of stuff, we can see information, widespread massively. Instead, like if they did something like that, like only that part of the world would know it and everybody else knew nothing of what was going on. But now if something like that were to happen today, you bet your butt that like people are going to be like upset about it, people are going to want to prevent that, and things like that aren't going to be allowed to happen. But that's all I had to say.
Important query. Why have no other Arab nations, let's say since 1948, or the Six Day War, or the Yom Kippur War, or the 1980s uprising, or any other period of time, why haven't they thrown open their borders and said, brothers of the faith, come to Saudi Arabia, come to Jordan, come to Libya, come to Tunis, come to Egypt, come join your brothers in faith. We will give you succor and shelter, and we will try and solve this problem through the international courts. Why hasn't a single Arab nation taken the Palestinians in? Has anyone ever asked that? Have you guys
Well, I
ever?
think because last time that Lebanon tried to do that, they just attacked Israel from Lebanon. So they just came in and then they like ruined the southern half of Lebanon.
That says a lot. That
Um,
says a lot.
well, yeah, because they let in Islamists. Yeah, because like they didn't screen them well enough.
How do you screen them? How do you keep people from lying?
Probably a very complicated process. I don't know.
If your intention is to commit terrorism, my chances are you're not too committed to the truth.
I mean, I don't know.
You
You
do
can
that
probably
via
track the
deception,
people and
right?
their history down. You can find their names, their records of things. I mean, you can't take their word for it. I mean, you have to screen people. That doesn't mean asking them. That means tracking their whole life history. And now with the internet, I think you can do that much easier. I mean, you can see people's digital footprints and their phone records. And I mean, like these days, you can pretty well tell who's a terrorist and who's not.
That's
back
not
then, it was just harder. I
true.
think.
That's absolutely not true.
What?
I don't mean to insult
What do you
you, Ron,
mean?
but that's rather wishful thinking. I'm sorry.
What? I work in cybersecurity. I know the shit you could do with tracking people. What do you mean?
Well, you didn't link that specifically to cybersecurity, and you can work in cybersecurity. You could be the world's greatest body language expert.
Right.
You can't, quote, pretty much tell, unquote, who is a terrorist and who isn't.
If you go through the entirety of a person's phone record and their internet history and every connection they have to people through like digital media, it's pretty damn hard.
Is that something legal to do on a mass scale? Is that something moral to do on a mass scale? Is that kind of
no? But I think that if you're bringing people into your country from an area that is maybe known for terrorist activity, I mean, I think that governments can and do already do that. That's what the NSA does. That's what Israel has the capability to do. Clearly,
That's correct. Machine lies.
You know, so your human reps, right? Is that
mean,
real? No, that's just a goofy thing that I put in my tag. I'm not actually from the UN. Although I am probably the closest thing to a UN council thing as we have here, because everybody here seems to.
Are you a globalist?
The lives of Palestinian citizens.
Are you a globalist? Are you a globalist?
I am a globalist.
You are a globalist? Oh, I didn't know. We would have been fighting about that way more than all the other stuff. You're a globalist?
I guess in some sense of the word, probably. Yeah.
Oh, well, we'll have to have that conversation one day.
Yeah.
Come on,
but yeah, I mean,
so
it seems like today, listen to you. It comes down to the innocent, like the children, and
yeah,
none of us. I don't think anybody on this panel wants.
Just to be clear, my consistency test across all of this to me is very simple. I want to minimize civilian deaths. To me, they're evil, they're horrible, they're wrong. I don't want them to die.
Children.
So even yeah, I mean, especially children, but just I mean, like any civilian, like you or me,
you on that too. I just
like you or me could be a citizen in any country, and our government could do some crazy shit, and then as a consequence of that, we just get shot in the head by a stray bullet one day, and I'm like, that could be me, that could be my mom, that could be my dad. Like that's how I think of it. So it's like that to me is the litmus test. I would apply that to any nation, any war. That if you initiate that attack against somebody, that is evil and wrong and should be condemned. If you are a country that has it happen to you, and then you retaliate, not just by going after the people that did it to you, but by going after the civilians of that country, you are also evil and wrong, and you should not do that action because that is
we've never had
that. That's my position.
So. We have like laws for war, but I don't know if it's ever met your standard yet.
Well, and Israel's broken. I mean, like the UN has accused them of war crimes dozens and dozens of times, but the international courts.
Well, what Gaza did was pretty war crimey to me.
Yeah, of course. But again, the thing that I get the feeling of, Jeff, is that it seems like to me almost like you're not willing to separate the actions of a government versus it's like the moral worth of its citizens.
I didn't say I'm not willing to.
That's what it feels like to me.
I said where we draw the line in different places. I've never once said I don't have a line. We just draw it different. I don't think 100% of Gazans support Hamas. I think a significant enough number do to make it be a state action instead of a terrorist action, like Chris said.
And also the fact that Hamas literally is like their stated thing. The thing they do
is in their charter. I read the one document. Like if you read one document, just read the Hamas charter. You almost don't need to read anything else to figure out your moral position in this.
I mean, the fact that they use human shields in the first place, it's really on them when their civilians get killed, not on Israel, in my opinion. If Hamas, their government is using human shields to try to keep Israel from attacking them, and Israel attacks anyway, that's on Hamas, not on Israel.
It is if Israel acts with appropriate restraint and in self-defense. There is no appropriate restraint. I think that goes out the window when they drop over 6,000 bombs in 5 days over a strip of land that is the length of Fort Worth to Dallas. I think they've crossed the line.
And that Hamas tried to stop.
Wait, sorry, what?
That they warned people ahead of time to evacuate out of, and Hamas tried to stop.
Yeah, well, so they gave
Hamas seems way more the problem than Israel.
They gave over 1 million people a couple days to get to the south of Gaza. Yeah. That's not even possible.
Which sucks.
That's not even possible.
Honestly, probably shouldn't have given that.
I wouldn't consider that warning an appropriate
first step. You ever had a family member, anyone at all, kind of scratch their head and wonder, if war is so terrible, why would we even, to the slightest degree, want to encourage it as a possible problem-solving solution by making rules for war? War should be such a horrifying brink of action that there are no more rules. And if you actually are going to go to war with somebody, you should make every effort to eliminate that threat permanently. That is what war should be. War should not be sport. And we are treating it as if it is sport, in a sense. A TKO, well, that was below the belt. Well, he got a point subtracted. War should horrify everybody. I've never fought. I don't have a military background, but war should terrify everyone. Are we terrified of war anymore at the civilizational level, even with nukes being involved? No, we're not. We should be. In war, if you have an enemy that you are willing to declare war upon, you do everything to end it forever after, so there can be no cycle of violence to come back on you. There's a brief quote I read in a science fiction novel years ago that's absolutely fantastic. It goes like this: there is no escape. We pay for the violence of our ancestors. The only solution then is not to make future violence for our descendants to inherit from us, right? The consequences of. In this case, it's so far past that point. War now should be total and complete. So there is one victorious side or not. And they should either come to a table peacefully or be dragged there. Now, the great powers like the US and others, they haven't. I don't think any Western powers or any other powers, for that matter, have actually truly thrown their weight around to create peace, because there are so many other interests in play. It's a very dirty business. It's now a sport where money can be made, favors can be traded. What we're doing now is kind of spinning the wheels, right? We should be, all of us, and I'm a hypocrite when it comes to this, we should be a lot more politically active and actually take back control of our country so that our political representatives can't send billions of dollars abroad anymore to prosecute wars like this. That's where we can actually make a difference. And I'll hush now.
No, I mean, especially if I would have no problem with sending millions and millions of dollars of humanitarian aid if we could actually ensure that it was actually going to get in the hands of the people that need it. But most of the time we send humanitarian aid, it just goes to defense contractors and other shit like that. So it's almost no point in it, because almost none of that humanitarian aid actually gets to the people that need it.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why one of the best things that you can do is to not send aid in the form of money, but in the form of actual, like, cans of food, water, the medical supplies.
But
So
we don't do
it
that.
can't be converted into guns because it's just going to be like medicine.
I completely agree, but they don't do that. They just send billion-dollar aid packages and just like, oh, I don't know what happened to the money. It went somewhere.
That's a feature, Chris, not a bug.
Oh, I know. I'm
Okay.
believe me, I'm aware.
Yeah.
It's
a shitty system.
I mean, like, in the most ideal scenario for this that I can imagine, I would say, if the U.S. was going to get more involved, that our part would be in to go and try to extract as many innocent civilians from Gaza or something as possible and let Israel do their worst. However, we would just end up rescuing lots of people that would be radicalized by the same thing. We'd end up raising a bunch more future bin Ladens and such in our country. And so it just perpetuates the cycle. From a completely pragmatic standpoint, like, shock and awe is probably the only real standpoint. The fact that Israel isn't going there right now, I think, speaks to the restraint. I don't think it speaks to how, like, over the top they're being. I think there's a lot of case that can be pragmatically made for actually devastating Gaza completely. And I don't support it, but I'm saying I see the point.
I think, again, that if you apply that same logic in reverse, I think it would be very scary if the actions of the American government to other countries would morally justify those countries carpet bombing us and having people like us die as collateral.
Terrifying.
I don't. That's not a standard that I apply to the world.
I don't wish it upon us either, but I would understand it.
Well, are we? So here, let me ask y'all a question, because it seems like the framing of this conversation has changed a lot from, like, are we talking about our opinions of what we want things to be like, or are we just talking about the way the world is? Because if we're talking about the way that the world is,
talking about the way the world is.
We have no control over it. The strongest will survive, the weak die, and that's it. That's the end of the I mean, if we're just here to talk about what's going to happen, realistically, Gaza is going to get glassed. The conflict is going to last probably indefinitely, and it will end eventually in those people being genocided. Israel's going to win because they're backed by the West and they're very powerful. And that's going to be it. I mean, that's realistically what's going to happen.
I think we're all idealists. You know, the people that you're here with. If we're talking about ideals, every one of us would rather that everyone get along and hold hands and be happy. We
Well,
would
but
all much
that's
rather
My
what's
peace.
emotions
confusing to
are
me, though, because
adjusted to what is likely and realistic, and yours seem adjusted to what should or should not happen.
well, yeah, because so maybe
Like, I
that's
know
where the
children are going to
disconnect
die in
is,
a war.
because I thought
I would,
we were having this conversation to give our opinions and judgments about the situation, what's right, what's wrong. That's what I'm used to. When I hear people talk about politics, I'm
that's because
used
you
to
hang out
people
with
saying, I
leftists.
condemn this, I support this, this was a good call, this was a bad call, and then we give our takes on what things are good and bad.
This is the extreme stream, Rowan. We don't have to take any bullshit
I
here,
think what
okay?
Hamas
There's
or
no
Gaza
bullshit
did.
zone.
Yeah, and you hang out with leftists. That's why you are used to those kind of conversations.
Or just
But
all news is all news, all commentary. What Paul makes, what we all do, in my opinion, is we give our opinions on things.
I've been given my opinion. I've tried
But
to
you're not
ground
really
it
giving your opinion, Jeff. You're
in
kind of just
fact
saying,
and
like, well, that's what's
reality.
gonna
I have given my
happen.
opinions plenty of times, and I'm going to give it again. I think what Hamas did in Gaza was wrong, and I think what Israel is doing in response is justified.
Okay, well, okay, yeah.
But I've said that like 100 times in different ways.
Well, but then when I push you on it, it seems like you're like, well, ideally, I wish they would get along.
No, I
And
was
it's
saying that about you. Like, you seem to be coming from an ideal position.
I know, but if I'm
I don't
asking
want
you,
children to die.
ideally, what would you have happen? Would you have Israel do this? Would you
Ideally, I probably the same as you. Ideally, I would have no children die. I would have no single citizen that doesn't support Hamas die.
Well, okay, no, but I'm not talking about a fantasy ideal. I'm talking about a realistic
Well,
ideal
what is ideal?
that if we were like if you were a person that had influence and could
I
push
think
and
Israel
influence
is showing
countries, what
restraint.
would
I
you
think
have them do? That's
the
what I'm
the
asking.
eyes of the entire world is with Israel now. I think they're going out of their way to minimize casualties, and I think they're going out of their way to
Okay.
be as humanitarian
So
as
you
possible.
think that
And it's not going to
6,000
satisfy
bombs?
everybody, but
Do
it
you
does
think that
satisfy.
6,000 bombs is showing restraint?
Yeah, I don't know the logistics behind it, but so
May,
far it's
may I
not
bring something
raising
up?
any flag with me.
May I
It
bring
seems like a
something up?
normal part of war, a military response.
Go ahead, John.
When the Indians were trying to get the British to leave their country and return rule to their country, right, the British Empire, they used pacifistic resistance in order for the British to be forced to take monstrous actions and then step back from that monstrosity, right? Because the citizenry at home wouldn't put up with it. And India, this is a gross simplification of things, but it worked in that case. Now, imagine it wasn't the British Empire that had conquered India and taken it over, but let's say a fantasy Germany, right, with a Hitlerian emperor that went in with the same kind of racial purity ideas worn openly on the sleeve. If they were faced with nonviolent resistance in the form, there wouldn't be an India anymore. It would be lesser Germany, and there would be, right? We can all hope for kumbaya and this and that, but certain political groups, certain states are just going to bowl right over their opposition. In this case, you've got to look at each side. Now, here's a question. If I posted this, I think at Paul's forum. Here's a question. Just to be self-interested from our point of view as post-Enlightenment Westerners who value the separation of church and state. If I could wave a magic wand and come to a conclusion, I'm not picking who wins, but if, let's say, the Palestinians could win, absolutely, or the Israelis could win, absolutely, one side or the other, right? The victor ensures that who they're currently in conflict with could never come back and rejoin the fight. So there's only one winner, the Israeli side or the Palestinian side, right? Between those two sides, which one, if we were to conflict with that side next, would treat with us more justly and more sincerely in terms of reciprocity and de-escalation and long-term planning and cohabitation on this jewel of a planet?
And which one is tolerant of gay people, trans people, all that kind of thing?
Can you pick one side? Because I can do it pretty easily.
It would be Israel. It would be Israel. Of course, it would be
Yeah.
Israel.
Then that should inform a lot without taking away the humanity of anyone else. It should inform us about a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, if we
Why
had to
haven't
pick, if we had to pick the country that if I had to flip a coin, if God spoke to me and was like, "I'm going to nuke one country," which would it be? I guess I'd pick Palestine purely because Israel was at least a democracy, even though that is under threat now under Netanyahu, because I consider him a bit of a fascist-leaning guy. But
He
I
is.
mean, yeah, they're more of a
Fascist
Western.
leaning is a meaningless term.
Yeah,
Dude.
Well,
Yeah.
he's trying to disarm the judicial branch of the Israeli government
Don't
to
get
give
me
himself
wrong. Like
massive
That's not
amounts of
fascist,
I
that's
unilateral
hate Trump,
power.
but
totalitarian.
He's
people
a
trying to say he was
scary
Trump,
person.
he was fascist for all those years, did nothing but hurt the discourse.
Totalitarian is a better word because it can
Yeah.
apply to anyone. It's now look at the ethos behind the two governments, right? I'm bringing this up. Machine Lies isn't going to like this, and I'm sorry if you're listening. I don't equate all Muslims with the religion of Islam, but if you look at Islamic civilization, not individual human beings who may be of any faith, but if you look at Islamic civilization, the traditions of jurisprudence and law, you will see a category of human beings in Islamic civilization called the dhimmi. This is why I think a lot of people who are Jewish cannot imagine not terminating this war in the worst possible way of finality possible because of the concept of dhimmi or dhimmitude. If you don't know what that is, before you spend too much time not looking it up, you should look it up.
No, you
You
talked about it the other day, and I know what you mean.
Islam, and you can check your own multiple sources, but it's a fantastic surface level dive into Islamic holy text, religious text, jurisprudence. Al Azhar University in Egypt has a lot of other sources, more radical pro-Islamic sources. You've really got to look at which civilization, what kind of ethos is represented by the two sides here. And there are extremists on both sides, absolutely. There are moderates on both sides, absolutely. But when you come down to brass tacks, one of these two sides is informed by a tradition of totalitarian supremacy over their neighbors so that they can be subjugated and put under the rule. Those that are willing to kind of play along are allowed in. The surface level is absolutely correct. But you look up at the word, you look at what a dhimmi is and how non-Muslims have been treated by Islamic rulers in Islamic civilizations in the past and even up till now. It should inform you quite markedly about what's going on here.
Okay.
Think
Well,
about
I mean,
the Jewish
that might be
populations of many other Middle Eastern countries and
that might be true,
non-Muslims.
John. I know that Machine Lies and you got into it the other day. I think you guys both made good points. However, I would say that in my history studies, I think the Islamic countries and Islamic civilization did a lot to advance science and progressive social ideals and everything throughout all of history. I don't think it's fair to say that the entire concept of Islamic civilization is necessarily responsible for this. This is definitely a splintered extremist faction.
No, it's not.
That Muslim faction that specifically interprets the Quran and different things in different ways that are very very different from what I would consider traditional Islamic civilization. I just don't think it. I think this characterization that Islamic civilization necessarily means barbaric or the subjugation of other people is necessarily always true. It has been true maybe at certain points in the past, but I don't think it's necessarily part of the psychology of most of the Muslim people I've talked to anyway. They don't even think like that.
I'm not talking about individual Muslim people. I'm talking about Islamic civilization at the same scale I'm talking about Western civilization. At a civilizational level, there are definite characteristics in Islamic civilization that are totalitarian and will subject all other peoples to being conquered. It is in their holy book. It is in their holy writings.
Okay. So
modern Muslims may want, many of them may want a reformed version of this paradigm. I hope that comes about. But It's there in black and white. It's in the Quran. It's in the Hadiths. Some people reject the Hadiths. Then there's a tail eating its snake because the Quran instructs people to follow the word of Muhammad, and the Hadiths are apparently the word of Muhammad. Islamic scholars debate this, and Islam itself and Islamic civilization aren't quite as unified as I'm saying. It's a surface level analysis, but there's internecine fighting between schools of jurisprudence, 5 main ones as far as I know. We as Westerners, we really do have to look at the long term. If we have to conflict with one side or the other here, not necessarily only Israel or not only Palestine, but the ethos driving their politicians, their religious leaders, how they can be kind of maybe subverted from within by extremists. Who are you going to want to fight? You know, a middleweight boxer or Mike Tyson on his best day, juiced up to the gills? You know, it's pretty easy to pick who you want to face if you're going to have to face him.
I mean, do you think that there's something fundamental that is unchangeable and essential about Islam that is not the way that is not Christianity or Judaism?
Yeah, it's right there in the Quran. It's in the Quran.
Well, you know that it's in the Torah as well, that if you're a Jew, that you are that they want to bring upon the Messiah and bring up, Zionism seeks to expand the Jewish like ethno state as wide as it can possibly go, because like they don't view non-Jews as like equal human beings. If you take the Torah,
that's not true of all Zionists.
At a certain level, it is true, Jeff. And at a certain level, it is extremist.
I know Zionists. There's different strands of Zionism.
Yes,
some of
there
it
are.
means they just want a
100%.
homeland for Israel.
But we're talking about the most literal. I know, but okay, we're talking though about the most literal sociopathic interpretations of these books that you can get that from any holy book you want if you read it the right way. And my perspective is that it is through the process of becoming more secularized, of embracing things like liberalism, embracing things like modernity as we know it, Enlightenment values, right? It is not because of religion, but in spite of it, that we have made moral and scientific progress as a species. Christianity was brutal. It was horribly brutal for most of history until just the past, X 100 years. It has produced what we now know.
Elevated humanity beyond what we may have attained to. You're taking one aspect of it and making it the whole of Christianity.
No, that's not.
It gave us amazing art,
Jeff. That's not. I don't
philosophy,
want to accept a straw man like that, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that
you just said Christianity was brutal. You didn't say some of Christianity or part of Christianity. You said Christianity was brutal.
Yeah, well, because I'm responding to John how he's talking about Islam, and I'm saying that every religion has had.
I'm talking about Islam. I'm talking about Islamic civilization, and I very specifically mentioned. We are viewing this from a post-Enlightenment point of view, where we have a separation of church and state. In Islam, as it is taught, it's in the foundational book. You can look at all of the other writings that their jurisprudence scholars come to. Politics is religion, is politics is religion, is politics is religion in Islam. They are inseparable. They are inseparable.
Not if there's some kind of like reformation in Islam, or they take it less literally, like what had to happen with Christianity for it to come out of the Inquisition. I mean, you look at any literal interpretation of a holy book can be taken to justify war and horrible atrocities of people that are not part of that faith. But I think any religion, and that's kind of what I support, is the secularization and the liberalization of all religion to get to a point where they step out of the fundamentalist crazy shit and we can embrace some loose consensus of like ethical modernity, and that we don't embrace crazy death cult stuff anymore. And that's happened with most of Christianity. That's happened with most of Judaism. There's certainly still plenty of Islamist governments that are not like that, but it can happen to them too. I don't think that there's anything fundamental about them that's going to keep them like that forever. They just haven't gone through the same process that Christianity went through.
I don't think you need to be secularizing people's religion, because I think there's positives and value in religion. If you're talking about secularizing or removing or diminishing the violent elements of religion, that's one thing. But
Yeah,
I
or
wouldn't
just the more
describe that as
literal
secularizing
interpretations of
religion,
it.
because people's spirituality doesn't need to be secular. You can keep
No.
the positive spiritual aspects.
Sure. I mean,
Uh-oh.
whenever I say to secularize, I mean to get away from the fundamentalist, literal interpretations of every word and just having more nuanced, metaphorical understanding, like Catholics do for most of the
That's
Bible.
not so. I wouldn't call it secularized.
Okay, well,
Maybe it's semantics. I agree
making it
with what you're
less
saying.
fundamentalist, maybe just
I agree.
more,
Yes.
more modern, more.
Defundamentalizing it. Yes.
Yeah, just to integrate religion with more of what we consider liberalism today, and not extreme, literal, crazy shit like everything in Genesis, which most Catholics now do. Like most of them take most of Genesis very like figuratively. They don't believe that the earth is actually 6,000 years old. You know, that's what I mean. That the further away we get from a literal interpretation of these books, the better off I think that civilization becomes.
From what I understand, from the brief I've looked into, Islam is undergoing that process currently.
Yeah, because the whole world is, and like they might be. I mean, some of those countries are a bit like, you know, they haven't gone through that process fully yet. But I think that humanity, if you're cautiously optimistic, as I try to be, the more we globalize, the more that we have the influence of liberalism, the more that everywhere eventually will kind of inch toward that. If countries facilitate that, and if the U.S. quits having, such shit foreign policy and actually engages in genuine peace processes and trying to facilitate that coming about, I'm optimistic for where the world could go. But yeah, that does involve getting away from these literal fundamentalist interpretations.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that.
Yeah.
And
I
the
wanna say
panel's
one
about to
quick-
get extreme. Machine is here.
Hello, Machine. I saw you the
I'll-
other
I'll-
day on stream.
I'm glad to know people are watching. That's
Who
good
said
to
that?
know.
Who said they saw me on stream? I'm sorry.
Me.
Oh,
yeah.
Rowan. Oh, what's up, man?
Hey, what's up? How are
yeah,
you?
It's nice to meet you. Yeah, you were
Yeah,
watching
you
my
too.
stream, huh?
I did. Yeah, I watched y'all the other day.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching.
What happened with
Yeah,
Kim
thanks for
and
watching.
Tommy? I must have missed that. Not that I care that much about
Yeah,
Tommy.
that first 2 hours, man. Like
It was
a
a
lot
great show, man.
Yeah, a
you
lot
guys
of
had such a
the-
good show.
Yeah, a lot of the and I wish, oh my god, I wish we had a Jewish person on panel. That's all we need. You
We
know,
that
could
would've
probably
been
get you one.
I need to get a Jewish person on this
There's
this
a
panel.
few in our communities.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where
because-
is the DEI board for your streams, Jeff? Where's the Jewish representation in these conversations?
Yeah, I need
Well,
to go
clearly
to the
because
local...
we're not.
Well, I had Cass on here the other day. Cass is Jewish.
Yeah, yeah, I invited him back. Maybe I need to start a correspondence with him because I know I talked to him.
Well,
yeah.
let's be honest. No, I'll say, let's be honest. Most Christians think they're the Jews, so let's just be honest.
Yeah, that's some of the things I got into last night. You know, is about how the church believes it's Israel. You know, and it doesn't believe Israel is a place in this world. It believes it's part of a heavenly structure of Israel. You know, that does not exist in this world. But of course, some of the Jewish sects believe in Tikkun Olam. You know, which is the mending of the world, the salvation of the world.
Kabbalistic concept.
Yeah, but it also extends into secularism via people like Ben Gurion. You know, they take an interpretation of the book of Isaiah that's kind of socialistic. And this is actually interesting because the League of the Just, actually the organization that Marx was a part of, the League of the Just, that was an extension of the Young Hegelians. One of their stated goals was the bringing of the kingdom of heaven on earth. You know, so it's interesting. You know, even they're following some sort of quasi-religious or a pseudo-eschatology that they've derived through the teachings of St. Paul. And
That's a great point.
Yeah, so it's and I think that about Sayyid Qutb. It may shock people to learn that Sayyid Qutb was educated at, you know, basically at UC Berkeley. You know, the guy who started the Muslim Brotherhood. You know, so it's and then you get into the discussion of why all these woke people support it. And I know Neurojack will be back. He always falls out. It's just me
Yeah,
and him
he's probably
showing up.
driving.
Me and him show up at the same time.
Hey, Jeff, can I ask you one more thing to kind of close the loop on our talk? Can I ask, like, is what would it take for you to say that Israel's actions are unjustified?
I don't know. I'll let you know when it happens. I
For
definitely
me,
will.
Hey, fair.
For
fair
me,
enough.
it'd be
They
if
haven't
sent their-
flattened Gaza yet.
That's true. Yeah, Chris, how about you?
For me, it would be if they sent in ground troops that went in and individually executed children and women and stuff like that, innocent
Which they're not gonna
civilians,
do.
which is what Hamas did. So,
Like, even if they did a Hiroshima, I don't even know if I would object. And they
Yeah,
haven't
okay.
done that. They haven't come anywhere close.
That's
We
the,
come from very different moral foundations. That I don't know how to respond.
yeah, I
to
think
that.
I think that's a little extreme. Yeah, you're willing to excuse Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Just that's pretty morally depraved, I would say.
Where can I add, like, what then? Where do you derive your morality from, then, Jeff? Like, what would you say your guiding principles or your litmus test is for whether actions are moral or not?
I think I'm pretty morally normative, actually, especially for a Satanist. I
think
I
if you were
don't
a
think
Satanist,
any of my
you'd have to be.
positions are that aberrant
Right.
in wartime.
Yeah, you would have to. Yeah. I think Satanists are more, so to speak. They follow a more normative set of morals than most people would, at first glance, think that they
that is the
ascribe
sad
to.
truth about our society right now. Yeah.
So,
That's very
I mean,
true.
I like to minimize suffering too, but I'm just realistic about it. And I said before, I don't have the compassion you do for the Gazans. I consider them the
Yeah.
aggressor, and it's hard to sum it up. And you consider Israel the aggressor, so it's hard to sum it
Well,
up.
Israel initiated the conflict.
Not the one over the weekend.
But I'm not talking about the one over the weekend. I'm talking about when they kicked millions of Palestinians out of their villages and homes.
that was the inciting event that I was
that's
trying to get at
For what
earlier.
happened October
That's
7th,
where
that
you
was
should.
because that was in their Hamas's charter.
That's
We're
where
gonna do
they
that
walked into
tomorrow.
homes. Hold on. That's where they walked into homes and killed babies and did all that stuff.
I don't know anything about that.
Oh,
I'm open to
you need to
sources.
read about history. You need to read about history.
Well,
You're
give me
ignorant
some
about history.
sources.
You're ignorant about history. Go read about the Nakba.
I've been
Ilan
reading
Pepe.
about history. I haven't read every single detail of
Hold
history.
on. You asked me
yet. So
about
if
a
you
source.
have
You asked
some-
me for the source. Jeff,
Yeah.
you asked me about the source, didn't you? Did you ask me
Yeah,
the source?
so give me
I'm
the
giving
source.
you
But
an
don't make out
Israeli
like I'm not
historian.
reading any
Hold on.
history at all.
Hold on. I'm giving you an Israeli historian, Ilan Pepe. He talks about the Nakba, where they killed babies and women and children.
Is there like an official source or
Have you ever heard of Sabra and
Wikipedia or
Shatila?
encyclopedia?
Have you ever heard of the Sabra and Shatila massacre?
No.
Okay.
Tell
Then
it
you
for
don't
me.
know. Then you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know.
I'm
What you're talking
asking you for if you're gonna
about.
come on.
I'm giving you information. It's not. I'm telling you what happened.
You can just give me the information without telling me I'm ignorant and don't know stuff.
I can do both. I can do
how
both.
you
You made an emphatic claim. You made an emphatic claim about.
But don't come on my stream and do it. Like you
don't
can
want
give
here,
me
it's
sources
okay.
and information without saying you don't know.
Jeff, if you don't want me here, that's
You
okay.
can just give me the sources. I don't.
I
Understand
gave you
why
the source. I gave you the source. I quoted.
I don't
Ilan
understand
Pepe.
the aggression.
Because you're saying, "Give me the source. Give me the source," and I keep giving you the source. It's
I'm
almost like
still
you're not
waiting
listening
for the
to me.
source. It's like 10 statements of how
I'm
ignorant
quoting.
I am.
I'm quoting a author. I'm quoting a author that you have to
How
go
do you
read
spell
yourself.
that massacre? I can look it up.
Sabra and Shatila, Sabra and Shatila, Shatilla. See, now you're engaging with me. Before you're telling me that I don't have sources, I'm giving you the source,
I
and you're
didn't tell you
refusing
you
to
didn't
look
have
it
a
up.
source. I asked you for. You can rewind the video. I asked you
I
several
gave you
times
the
for
source.
I never once said you don't
gave
have
you
a
the source, Jeff. Jeff, I gave you the source now. Now, are you still gonna claim that they didn't kill babies and women and children? Are you still gonna claim that?
But you haven't actually given me a source.
Go look up the Sabra and Shatila massacres.
Given me a title.
I just
gave
don't
you
know
the
why
title.
you-
You
I
go
don't know
look it
why
up on
you coming at me.
Wikipedia. Pull up the Wikipedia page right now.
That's what I
it's
just did.
in the
but it's
chat
right
right
that
now. You just
gave
click on
me.
it.
Yeah, just click on it, dude. Like don't keep
I've
asking
done
questions.
that. I'm there now, but it's not.
Okay.
That's not you giving me a source. So I don't know why you picking a fight with me all the time.
Okay, here, can I cut in for a sec? It's
What
good
kind of
that
source are you looking
that's
for?
a great source to look into. I'm glad that you gave it, but now I think we do got to probably give Jeff some time to actually like read through it because he doesn't know
yeah.
the information, and that's okay because
Of course.
it's
I
fair to let him
understand
read
that.
it.
I
But
understand that. I'm not saying that I'm ignorant on many subjects.
Sure.
I'm not saying ignorant as a dig. There's many things I don't know about. I know about like philosophy, political theory, certain things about theology, and if somebody asks me how to fix a computer or how to run a website, I know dog shit about any of those things. So I'm ignorant on many fucking subjects. You know what I mean?
And that's kind of what I was trying to get at earlier, Jeff. And I get it takes time to read the stuff, but I just think like. And again, I said that I would get you more sources later. That's a great one that Machine just gave
I have
you.
lots of sources.
I think that history is kind of where I think
in
people like
Lebanon.
me, and I assume people like Machine are kind of like coming from whenever we come at this issue, because the history of Israel's occupation and treatment of these people and these areas provides the context that gives me my anti-Israel bias. And I get that it takes time to read and parse through, but that's
Well, yeah,
I think that
this
would
is
be
the
helpful.
stuff. This is the stuff that would be helpful to balance out what I'm reading. But this says
So-
it happened in Lebanon.
The Nakba is
And that's-
kind of the biggest thing.
balance.
That was
How do you
the
spell that?
expulsion, NAKBA, and that was the expulsion of the hundreds of thousands of Arab Palestinians out of their land that Israel kind of like celebrates as their day of independence, and then the Palestinians have as a day of
Because they got
mourning.
attacked by 7 Arab nations.
You can't not know about the Sabra and Shatila massacre and then claim that somebody should get nuked.
I don't know about either.
Then claim that somebody should get nuked. That's just free floating. That's wild. You know what I mean? Because words have effects. You know what I mean? And when you call for mass murder like that. I mean, it's not just nothing.
You're being disingenuous. 'Cause I didn't say Israel should get nuked. I said they haven't pulled that yet. He asked me where my line was.
I just think certain statements like that just shouldn't even be made.
Reframing the context that I said it in.
Of course. I mean, and I'm not coming at you, Jeff. You know how I am. I got I push back against certain things, and I let the chips fall where they may. I mean, really, it is what it is. But I can't. I won't sit here and just swallow the fact that they didn't kill women and children. They absolutely did. You're talking to
I never said they did.
UN Human Rights Council representative, so maybe we need to take this.
I never once said Israel's never killed women or children.
Jeff has acknowledged that there is a cycle of atrocity involved here.
And I've acknowledged that Hamas is a terrorist group, but we need to go into the history behind that. This is a terrorist group that's funded by Israel.
There's no history
in the beginning
behind terrorism that justifies it or makes it okay for me. It doesn't matter.
I know. So why should Israel fund terrorist groups like Hamas? It's a good question.
Well, they shouldn't.
They did fund Hamas.
Are they a terrorist group, or are they the government of Gaza? Are they a terrorist group or the government of Gaza? I'm really confused on this.
They're both.
They're both.
They are the government of Gaza
that
carries out terrorist atrocities.
So when Israel is funding them, are they funding them as a terrorist group? Or are they funding them as the government of Gaza?
They funded them as a group to get rid of the opposition, which was the legitimate people who the Gazan people wanted to govern them. So they're set up as a dummy corporation, to govern the people of Gaza. I mean, it's not rocket science, really.
Okay, that's fair. I'm genuinely asking questions. I don't have an agenda here.
No, I don't have one either. I'm just a guy from Detroit.
Okay. I'm just making sure. Yeah, me too. I'm a white guy from Texas. I have less of a dog in this fight than most people. I'm pretty sure. So
So Netanyahu said that one of the pragmatic reasons for them propping up and funding Hamas was to prevent the consolidation of Palestine as like a cohesive like people and culture, because as long as Hamas was in power, being that corrosive, that extreme, that would prevent Gaza and the West Bank and all these people from coming together. That was one of the reasons that he is on record as saying, and I believe as recently as 2019, I believe. I could be wrong though about that date.
That is truly horrific that he did that. I agree. The fact that he's open about it too is also.
I just my concern though, and I think that history and context is the most important stuff that you know, that was kind of the main thing that I wanted to get into. But I worry that, at least from what Jeff is saying, that it seems like even if all that history were to be true, Jeff, it feels like that wouldn't change your opinion, because I feel like you would just come back and say, well, all that might have happened in the past, but I care about today and what Gaza represents. And I feel like you would still back Israel, even if the past 70 years turns out to be as horrific as I'm saying. I don't feel like
I'm going to tell you this. I don't know of Israel doing anything as horrific as what Hamas did. So to me, Hamas escalated beyond the level that they ever did, resolving the ambiguity for me once and for all. But I have a bias toward enlightened liberal democracies over genocidal terrorist regimes. So I'm going to read these things. I'm going to weigh the balance. I'm going to give them a fair reading. And I can't say what my final conclusion is going to be, but I'm just letting you know what my bias is and what I think about Hamas's recent escalation. And I think it set it beyond what anything in the past has been.
And I think in a greater context, I think it's interesting because you framed it in a narrative where you support liberal democracy, you know, over the alternative. I know. No, I get that. I get that. For what it's worth, I understand what that means. I wrote a fairly I guess lengthy title on that issue, you know, but I think like what's interesting is your rejection of woke culture, which is the hyper extension of the democratic liberal Western experience.
I don't see it. I find it very illiberal. That's one of the reasons I oppose it so strongly. It may have arisen within liberal culture, but it is not.
Yeah, that's right.
It does not espouse liberal values or act.
But that's what I mean. That's what I mean. It was founded by liberal. I mean, it was founded through liberalism. You know,
and I'm using liberal.
So what do you mean it rejects liberal
from progressivism, which also arose within liberalism? So classical Enlightenment liberalism versus progressivism, because some people consider both of those forms of liberalism. So I'm using a very specific form of liberal.
Yeah, and classical liberalism, like the kind of John Locke, would you say?
Yeah, like Enlightenment liberal. Yeah,
it says atheists like shouldn't be allowed in the society.
Well, that's not my version of it.
But that's what John Locke.
The version that's refined itself over the
John
centuries.
Locke was a long time ago, to be fair. That was
well, that's classical liberalism.
There's a lot of Locke I don't agree with. He was
There's probably a lot of classical liberalism you don't agree with, and you would do that based on the modern advancements of liberalism.
Let's say the United States liberalism as experienced or reflected in my lifetime. Modern American liberalism.
Which is what exactly?
That could be a whole stream in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think it needs to be, and I think that's what I'm trying to do on on my channel. I might do a whole stream on, the difference between classical liberalism and postmodernism or something like that, or neoliberalism, and the alt-right liberalism that is kind of, there's a neoconservatism and a neoliberalism that's relatively recent that's masquerading as classical liberalism. That's also
freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of thought, freedom of association, freedom of self-determination.
Yeah, those are all within
agency, autonomy.
Yeah, those are all within, granted to you by the state, within classical liberal systems.
Well, wherever they
The-
come
the-
from,
the individual has no
I
sovereignty.
support cultures that grant those.
The individual gives their sovereignty to the state. That's how classical liberalism is derived. If
But-
you read John Locke, if you read Thomas Hobbes, this is what the system is based on. The individual actually has no sovereignty. You
That-
actually
that-
don't have
rights have
that's-
to-
That's
rights
been
have
the
to come
case
from
Yeah, you
the
since,
get
state.
rights.
since Greece.
Yeah, you get rights
since,
by the state. That's right.
since some of the polises in Greece. So that's not unique to United States.
He doesn't.
Greece
The very
is-
or even
concept of a
Missouri.
right
You
have
know-
to be granted by a state.
In Greece, only the men could vote. The women and slaves could
But they
not
had
vote.
the concept of the state.
Only
that people
only
would give their
property owning men
sovereignty.
could vote in Greece. You know?
I mean, without
Yeah,
a
I'm just saying
state, there's no
they
such thing as
developed the
rights.
concept of the state that people give their sovereignty to. So that's not anything uniquely American
I mean,
or even uniquely liberal.
well, it's two poles. It's also Sparta because it's liberal and
Yeah, that's what I was thinking
democratic.
of, Sparta.
Yeah. I mean, it's a republic and democratic. So it doesn't just hinge on democratic values. It also hinges on republicanism, which is about strong rules of the state and all that stuff, and about local government and about setting up courts systems and all that stuff.
Real
Yeah,
quick,
I like
that is
all
a
of that.
that is a cute ass baby.
I know. She's
The eyes
she's
are
the star
quite-
of the stream.
Her,
Oh, have you met Juniper?
I don't think so. Her eyes are
She's our
quite
future.
beautiful and piercing.
Look at her.
She loves looking at everybody. She
She
smiles
loves
at
the
everybody
YouTube.
every time.
There's some humanity for the stream.
Right. I mean, this is what I fight for personally, but yeah.
Yeah,
baby.
that's why I said, but that's why I said I promised nothing before I hop on the stream because I was streaming all last night. So I apologize
man.
if I come off.
Did you
as
get?
like-
Did you sleep at all? Did you get sleep?
No, sir.
Oh my
You
god!
still haven't
Yeah.
slept? Oh my god, man.
Well, I slept like 2 hours, but yeah, it wasn't very nice.
Hey, that's about how much sleep I get most nights, so you should be fine.
Yeah, I know. Same
and
here.
look at me, I'm just missing teeth and shit, so you'll be fine.
Yeah, that's gonna be me in like 5 years.
Well, as long as you don't get chronic vertigo, you should be fine.
Yeah, I think I'm getting a lot of gray hairs. You guys can't see it on camera, but yeah, they're showing up.
I
shaved
got
all
one
of
in my
mine
beard
off,
too.
so-
They're coming in.
Yeah.
Well, you've
Well,
seen my beard. It's usually pretty much mostly white, and I shaved it off. So.
What are the elements, Jeff, of progressivism that you feel like are not compatible with American liberalism?
The authoritarianism, mostly the authoritarian tactics, the micromanagement, social control, social engineering, telling people how to talk, telling people what pronouns they have to use, cancel culture, shutting down speech on campuses, on social media.
Do you not feel like that fits within the context of what liberalism allows, though, as long as it's not because it's not legal authoritarianism, right?
My primary
It's
value is
social.
probably free speech more than anything else.
Okay. I mean, do you mean legal, like actual free speech, or do you mean free speech how conservatives use it to just mean like being able,
I mean, let me
being
talk.
allowed
Let
to say?
Let me get my ideas out. Don't try to shut down my speech, and don't try to tell me how to talk. Don't
Okay,
try to tell me
so
Without
what words
fear
to
of
use.
legal repercussion, right?
Don't
Okay, so-
impose consequences if I don't speak like you think I should be speaking.
so you want speech that is free of both legal and social consequences?
I won't, as long as it's legally protected. I don't care about the social consequences because
Oh,
I can
okay.
navigate around those. I have my whole life, but
Okay.
I don't want the state interfering with my ability to express. I think and process out loud. I need to be able to talk and dialogue
Yeah,
in
same.
order to
same.
clarify my own values for myself. I don't want anybody
I
interfering
agree.
with that process.
I agree. I don't believe I'm a free speech. I mean, whenever it comes to legal free speech, I'm right there with you. So I don't think we like disagree on that. I just think like whenever I've heard you talk about it, you seem to say things like cancel culture or like private companies deplatforming, like you're against that. And I would say
I
that's
am against that, but that's not legal.
One of the
I
things-
understand the distinction between legal free speech and that. I'm still
One of the-
against all that stuff.
I
But
guess
as
yeah,
long as
so-
America at least live with a society where I'm legally free to speak.
yeah. And so I agree with the concept of legal protection of free speech for sure. I just don't.
It's not
I
like
don't-
in Canada or England where the cops are going to come to my house if I post a tweet on social media.
Well,
Yeah,
can
no,
I?
that's
Well,
crazy.
well, I could play devil's advocate with that idea, and I have for a long time. You know,
And self-determination is another big one. Go ahead, play it. I'm
yeah,
all about
the fact. Well, every time you hear criticisms of democracy, you know, the first thing that gets brought out for the piñata is free speech. And I don't know if you guys have heard any critiques of democracy. You know, notable critiques of democracy. You know,
well, not modern one. There's historical ones.
oh yeah. Well, there's ones within classical liberalism, like those of the Federalist Papers. You know, where he talks about how democracy leads to factionalism. You know how factionalism is the disease of democracy. You know,
I don't know that I'm for pure democracy either.
yeah,
I might be for a form of republicanism like we have here in the U.S.
yeah, because factionalism has a danger of creating lots of subgroups within a society, and those subgroups can create a sort of tyranny of the majority. You know, and that's one of the things
Mob
that's
rule.
mentioned. Yeah, mob rule. Yeah, that's right. And then and I talked about this on my on yesterday's show a little bit, the criticisms of democracy itself by the founding fathers, you know, and one of the other places where they put the emphasis is on the newspapers. You know, because newspaper media ruins society. You know, they're aware of this fact that media has a very powerful aim and goal, and it has a powerful way of controlling the narrative, and the conclusion ultimately they come to is reflects a line I heard from an Alec Empire song where he says the freedom of speech is the freedom to lie.
Ooh. It's the freedom to speak. Lying could be a form that speech takes.
Lying
You
would
could-
be
I
part
don't
of
think
it,
it's. I don't think it's equivalent to the freedom to lie.
You can make up shit that's kind of true about somebody, like gaslighting them, that doesn't have to be false either, that just kind of spins a narrative about something. You know, you can keep on presenting, like you could
Yeah.
say, oh, look how this guy said this thing, and then play it like 100 times and make dozens of news stories showing how this guy said this thing, even though everything in that other statement he said were true. You could play a 12-second soundbite where the dude looks confused or something like that, and just fucking run that shit. You know, and that's the problem. It's like, yeah, you're telling the truth. You're just telling it enough times that and a skewed version of it that it paints a fucking totally false narrative. You know, and that's the problem. You know, with free speech is that they have weaponized fake news. You know what I mean? You know, to a certain
Rhetoric and sophistry are allowed in a free speech society, and it's just being educated and aware enough to recognize it and either avoid it or counter it when you need to. But I don't see how it's possible to have a free speech society and yet somehow outlaw or police rhetoric.
right.
And I don't
that
think
would
the
be
Greeks figured out how to do it either.
Yeah, they absolutely didn't. That's why they told Socrates to drink poison, and then he took over their society in like the next 100 years. And he said that my biggest fear is that that Athens will be remembered as the city that killed Socrates. You know?
And among other things. But yeah, they're definitely.
At least he was wrong about that. It's not just remembered that the city killed Socrates. That's true.
But that is its most notable achievement in a way.
I would say that just the way it produced all those philosophers has a lot more to do with its reputation than killing Socrates.
Well,
but yeah, it's definitely part of it. It's part of the history. There's no doubt about that. Although I don't. It's not really an argument. But what you're saying, I think your point overall is good.
Yeah,
I think
arguably, because I've looked at the Buddhist tradition, and arguably the Buddhists have as many erudite philosophers as the Greeks. You know, just saying. You know,
I'm just saying not as many well-known ones. I'm not saying they don't.
They're not.
Well-known.
They're not
Just
as
many
influenced
philosophers.
on Western culture as the
well,
Greek
they didn't
philosophers.
invent
I mean,
global.
philosophy was invented in Greece. The Eastern ones came later, but Western philosophy like I'm a Westerner, so I only know Western culture. And
Right.
the world I live in is
Right, but that's the problem is
primarily
that
by
Western, quote unquote, Western culture is actually global culture. It's not from anywhere.
It's a fair point.
Greece and Rome, the Hebrews,
Well, the
Christianity.
Greeks, you know what Aristotle said about the
Developments of
Europeans?
Huh?
You know what Aristotle said about the Europeans?
Did they have Europeans in his day? They didn't have
They
the
sure,
concept
they
of
sure,
Europe.
they sure did have Europeans in Aristotle's day.
They had people living in Europe, but I don't know that
Yeah,
Aristotle had the
exactly.
concept
They had people living
of
in Europe. Yeah, those were the Europeans. Yes. And what he said about them, he said they were the stupidest and most freest people on earth. That's what he said. That was his quote about them. And he said the Chinese were the most intelligent, yes, yet most enslaved. And the Greeks combined the virtues of the both. They combined both the freedom of the Europeans and the intelligence of the Chinese.
I'm sorry, I can't stop cracking up with the fact that I'm having a conversation with Christian Jesus and Muslim Jesus at the same time.
That's funny.
I thought so. But,
I am a
no,
godless heathen. I'm an
I know.
atheist.
I know. I'm
But
talking
I'll
about the
take
way
it.
you look. I'm talking about like I was just purely an aesthetic thing.
the
that's
Jesus
all.
hair.
Yeah.
Where are you? Is that a cemetery?
Who, me?
Yeah.
It's not
No,
a
it's my
cemetery.
dad's
He was like
backyard.
Oh,
Like,
looks like gravestones.
I'm like on a deck. Oh no, that's his house.
Okay.
I'm like up high on a. We have a
Oh.
deck back here. I'm sitting
I'm
on it.
seeing all kind of things.
Yeah, it's the graves of all the Palestinian children being genocided.
Right in your backyard, sure.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
makes sense. Well, I don't know what to say now.
I didn't even know about the extent of this. I've been reading the wiki article on the Sabra and Shatila stuff.
I've been reading the
crazy
Nakba.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. And using the Maronite Christians in that fashion, I mean, that is just criminal. And the Maronite Christians are the only Christian group that was militarily supported by both the Western Church and Israel. They rejected. The Christian Arabs joined with the Muslim Arabs and fought the Byzantine Church for hundreds of years. For hundreds of years. They considered them oppressors. They said better the Sultan's turban than the Pope's tiara. That's literally a quote by them.
I'm sorry. I'm reading shit. I'm distracted. Let me put it away.
I've been reading on.
No, it's all good.
I've been looking over the massacre.
I'm
thing.
trying to do.
I mean,
much at once.
anytime, and that's one thing to remember with me. I'm actually very pliable in that kind of sense. I'm not super, especially with things like this. I'm not super committed to any particular viewpoint. I'm far more in the center between Jeff and Roenn than I must admit I lean a little more to Jeff's side on it, but I'm still very, very much in the middle. And I didn't come into this particular discussion or maybe today a little bit, but I didn't come into this idea or this discussion that we've been having as a country from any particular viewpoint. I've been persuaded by this and that from the information I've gathered. So any new information is always useful. Although I have to say that I don't find historical atrocities to be particularly compelling as reasons to say that this side or that side has this right or that does that right. I feel like we have to operate from a position of when the last piece was to when that last piece was broken, and that's when I think kind of feel like anything before that is unproductive.
I just think the line becomes
back in
hazy
time,
when
back
it's
in
like
time.
when does, like, if we want to say that we should just kind of start from what's happening today, when does today become history? Do we consider whenever Hamas attacked Israel 2 weeks ago history? It's like how long has to
No,
pass
I
until
That
think-
didn't change the line for you.
irrelevant, huh?
That didn't change the line for you.
I
2
mean,
weeks ago?
it didn't. I mean, it confirmed for me that Hamas does evil shit and they're a horrible
like group of people, but it doesn't
Hamas slash
change.
Gaza.
Already knew that, basically, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
I mean, this stuff has been happening for 70 years. Like every 10 years, there's some giant attack from Hamas, and then like Israel retaliates and kills way more people. I mean, like this has been happening constantly for decades and decades. Like this is nothing new. It makes me sad, but it doesn't change the pattern, you know.
I mean, yeah, I agree. I don't see how it's productive to keep constantly jumping back to the previous thing. I feel like we have to go from the last piece. And like, let me also say, I have no preference towards Jews or Muslims. I'm not either. So I don't have any preference in this situation. I don't see one side as being more preferable to me than another. I have respect for both Judaism and for Muslims, for Islamic thought and Islamic history and Islamic. I think they've made a lot of important contributions to the realms of science and social discourse and everything else. Even though I don't necessarily believe in either one of those schools of thought as necessarily being the absolute truth, I think there's truth in both of them. I don't think that the people that are on the side of the Jews, the people that are on the side of the Islam, are necessarily either one of them is right. I'm a Christian. I think they're all going to hell. It's a joke. It's a joke. But yeah, I don't think any of them are necessarily any more right than the other when it comes to religious ideals or anything like that. I'm just looking at this strictly from a geopolitics standpoint. The most logical thing it seems like to me to do is to move from the most recent point of some definable peace to when that peace was broken, and when that peace was broken is what you have to operate from. You can't operate based on 100 years of war and history, because it's not productive.
And I think if you want to truly look at what's going on now, then you have to understand the status quo of the narratives that are being painted. You have to understand who controls the media. Okay, that's not a small point. Okay, who's controlling the narrative that you're watching? Who owns the companies? Almost all the news companies that you're watching play out this narrative. Who owns them? Who did they support? Who funds them? Okay, and I'm not going to answer that question here on Jeff's stream because I care about Jeff's stream. Okay,
now I want to know what would get me shut down. Oh, are you?
The ADL is watching. Machine, don't say it.
It's conspiracy stuff, Jeff. You wouldn't like.
Oh Lord, no, I don't believe that.
It's not conspiracy. It's not conspiracy. You look at who owns those companies. Okay, you look at
not every single media company in the whole world.
Who owns Fox News? Is it owned by a Zionist or not?
I don't watch Fox News. I don't watch any of the news channels.
Millions of people watch Fox News, and does it matter?
I don't know that it matters who owns them. More than their
absolutely,
content matters.
It absolutely does.
You think they're manipulating the content
based on the person who the beliefs of the person who owns it? Absolutely, they are.
I don't know that. I don't like the media. There are plenty of reasons to not like the media besides just who.
Do you know that Rupert Murdoch funded illegal settlements, illegal oil drilling in the Golan Heights? Do you know that?
I don't know that, but I'm not a Murdoch.
Well, he has. The guy who owns the company has an interest in what happens there.
But the media is not where I get most of my sources, and the media is. Then where
else would you get the information from?
I get it from social media. I get it from doing my own research.
Social media is.
I get it from encyclopedia articles. I get it from primary documents.
The same people who own the news own social media and all that stuff.
Not the individuals on it.
Yes, some of the individuals on it are bought and paid for by the same people.
Well, not the ones
absolutely true.
I think it's also a matter of understanding the history of the narratives and kind of where they originate from. So when you see people parroting them, you know kind of what is the ideological lineage from which they come, because there's a lot of weird warping that Israel and the Israel lobby and AIPAC and the ADL have done with a lot of this stuff that has, and because our culture funds, or not our culture, our country is in bed with Israel so tightly that to criticize the government of Israel, even if done super fairly, is usually met with criticisms of anti-Semitism. I mean, this has been the case for so long in America that it's like it's so hard to get information that is not tainted to have a pro-Israel slant.
I know Jews that are very critical of their own government.
Yeah, no, same.
Israelis that are very critical of their own government.
No, same. I mean, Gabor, is it that?
I can't stand him. That's Paul's new Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, he's cool.
I think he's a
great
sociopath.
analysis.
I can't.
Gabor Mate.
His videos put me to sleep. I can't stand him. I don't agree. No, I can't. No,
he gave a great analysis. I thought that one that Paul, that thing that Paul posted of him was a great take on the Israel thing, and him saying that he grew up like as a Jew with that like programming of like, oh, like we're the
honestly,
side of, like,
I tuned him out after like 10
and then
words.
he learned more and he realized the horrors of what the history of his country had done, that he completely like flipped his stance.
He was so flat and monotone describing.
Let me ask you this.
So hollow sounding.
Let me ask you this, Jeff. Do you think that Jordan Peterson is being told what to say?
I don't think he is. He sounds like he's the type to pretty much speak his mind. I don't know enough about Jordan Peterson.
Well, what about the fact that he works for Ben Shapiro now? You don't think that influences him to any degree whatsoever?
I mean, Jeff's not a Jordan Peterson fan, to be fair.
And how would you prove it if it did? Like, how would you detect it? I know Paul thinks that.
I would highly suspect that it has some influence. That's all I would. That's how I would go with it.
I'm just saying that Jeff's the wrong person to go after on that because he doesn't even like Jordan Peterson, as far as I know.
I don't dislike him.
But that's why I'm using him as an example. I kind of know that, you know. Yeah.
He's not a big influence on me whatsoever, one way or the other.
I
think what Canada's trying to do with him, with the like taking him from the board, is wrong. So I support him there. I hope he wins his fight. His Twitter feeds are cringe, and his haikus. I can't make it through any of his lectures because he never gets to the damn point.
Haikus are pretty cringe.
I've tried to read the book.
Haikus are cringe, though.
What is this?
What's that, man?
Are those rosaries? I mean, prayer beads.
Yes.
I just have.
But I don't know that. I don't know what Ben Shapiro. Like, you'd have to separate what he would say versus what he's saying as a result of Ben Shapiro directing him to say something. And that would be very hard to demonstrate to me. But that's what I would need to see. I got my little man thing.
Cool. I have arrows on mine because I'm a plague of arrows, so
got the headphones.
And I have a jar of powdered peanut butter.
Oh, that's awesome. You gotta get crunchy.
Peanut butter.
This shit is fucking awesome.
Powdered peanut butter. Damn.
You just put this with milk and ice and bananas in a blender. It's like,
oh, so it's not, you don't make peanut butter. You don't like
No, you can, but no. I just
say, how cheap is how expensive peanut butter? You can't just go out and buy peanut butter.
Now you use it in cooking.
No, that does sound good if you put it in shit.
Yeah, no,
it's awesome.
I just made some
powdered
peanut
peanut
energy
butter
things earlier. So.
Damn, son.
Peanut butter.
Well, I'm glad that we solved the Israel-Palestine.
Yeah, I was about to say, did we resolve it?
I'm glad we finally solved this.
Have we reached completion energy?
We did what they couldn't do for like 8 summits over the years. We figured.
Well, it was less bloody than I expected for 3 hours.
I think that it would be fun at some point to kind of like, you know, for a future stream to kind of go over the different proposals that have been done, if anybody cares to, because that's also a very interesting history whenever you look at all of the quibbles over how you divide up the streets of cities. It always gets into very, very tiny, like, minutia. And
is that some of the conflict, like down to the city level of?
Yeah, it's down to like. It gets down to like neighborhoods and like how they want to divide up Jerusalem down to which holy site, and then they'll say things like they're willing to give Palestine access to the, what is it, the dome of whatever, courtesy. Yeah, that they've offered to give them access to it, but they would legally own it and be able to like militarily deploy to it if necessary. They have the right to kick the Palestinians out of it, but they can come if they feel like it. There's all these stipulations of who has like the civil or like the military rights over what area, and they
Because it's a holy site for both groups.
Well, have you
So-
heard of the various theories concerning that place?
The what?
The various religious speculations concerning that place, like the Dome of the Rock. Like, it's interesting, like why that's a location for Muslims. You know, because it's supposedly a place where the Prophet Muhammad began to levitate. You know,
Oh.
and yeah, and then and also it's also a region where the Jews supposedly built their temple.
Right.
The first temple or the second temple, one of them.
Yeah,
second temple, I believe.
yeah. So some of the extremist groups, they dig underneath there because they claim that they'll find remnants of their temple underneath there, or even find the Ark of the Covenant under there.
Yeah.
Some people say that
That's-
they're gonna find either the tomb of Solomon or the Ark of the Covenant under there, or something like that. It's like
That's
really strange.
the radical factions that
Radical,
Paul
yeah, and this is
talked
more
about.
into conspiratorial
Yeah.
crazy stuff. But then other people, like certain Christian groups, have claimed that it's just a leftover Roman fortress that they're praying to, because the Jews go and pray there on the on the wall. It's called the Wailing Wall, and they
Yeah.
go and cry on the Wailing Wall. You know, there's all these pictures of
which is weird.
It is very strange. It's almost like the Shia ritual. You know, there's Shia
Yeah.
Muslims that they commit acts of self flagellation and self torture and all this stuff. They hit their chest over and over and over until they bleed in their chest. And they do this because they're remembering the murder of the Prophet's family. And it's something that most Orthodox Muslims, like, they would never,
Never do. Yeah.
stand there and beat themselves for hours. But people who believe, and also the Shia Muslims employ taqiyya a lot, because they were involved in military conflicts with Sunnis where they had to like be taken captive, and they had to lie about who they were. So they have this whole thing. So it's a military tactic that they use, and then they use that and put it on the rest of the Muslims, that Muslims do this stuff. Muslims are these crazy, like, senseless people that beat themselves. They remember murder. They're these crazy people that commit taqiyya, all this stuff. A lot of the things that, for example, the Iranian Muslims or Hezbollah does is construed with Sunni Islam, as a result, and it's just all mixed up and conflated with each other. And some of the Sunni Muslims, they have extremist factions, like, for example, Muslim Brotherhood and all that type of stuff, and Wahhabi sects. And most Sunni Muslims around the world, they consider the Wahhabi factions within our religion to be enemies of the Muslim people. They know that they funded like ISIS and all that stuff, that ISIS killed Muslims. They hate that fact. They believe that the Saudi Arabian government is the enemy of the Muslim people because they kill Muslims in Yemen. They senselessly butcher.
If you could somehow take religion out of all of this, would it be easier to solve the conflict?
I don't think so because the religion has coalesced in this universal message that you're talking about. A lot of these, whether we like it or not, a lot of these so-called universal values, as I talked about before, they're from quasi religious principles. Like, for example, like Marx talking about bringing about the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
It's all like interrelated. Like as you've said, I mean, about this fact because you claim that there's a continuity in the statement Western. I mean, I believe this too, but I just believe that it's so abstract. See, this is what I mean. If you want to claim Westernism, then you're claiming the Greeks, and now you're taking it back to 2,000
I am
years.
claiming the Greeks.
But now you're taking it back to 2,000 years. And I'm like, wait, I'm talking about right now.
That was mostly me. That's mostly been me.
Continuity
right
from,
now.
let's say, Homer and the Bible to right now.
Too historical, but that's too historical. We're talking about right now, the context in which we're in right now. I agree with doing that. I agree with shifting it to that level. of analysis. And I think that the conflation of Greek values with Western values, with Christian values, with liberal values is part of the problem.
It's a mix. It's a synthesis of all of those. But I think our intellectual values are Greek, but I think our cultural and moral and social values are probably more Christian and Hebraic than Greek.
See, that is the concatenation that I fear. Is because Greek and Christian values are inextricably opposed.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
we are a split culture. I think it was Bertrand Russell or one of the philosophers that said our all of our ways of thinking are Greek, and our ways of feeling or our moral ways are Christian. We are
And that
divided.
brings us, and that is the modern synthesis.
But that tension has been there from ever since Christianity merged with Western culture, probably since Hellenistic times.
But I feel it has not been resolved.
No, it hasn't been resolved in thousands of years, and it's not going to be in our lifetime.
And isn't it possible that tension between those two things is part of what creates progress?
Yeah, that gives Western
it's
culture.
It's part of what creates progressivism.
Yeah, it is. It's true. I mean, I don't bemoan the culture that allowed progressivism to rise, but I still think it's our responsibility to stand up against it when it goes too far.
I bemoan it.
Okay, all right, fair enough. I think that's fair.
Well, I'll definitely do a stream with you one day on the on liberalism and all the different roots of it and manifestations of it.
I think
through history, if you want.
Oh yeah, because I think if we get into because the way I learned it was like these four guys, and I think people need to really look at these four guys or take a re-look at these four guys. Machiavelli, Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. That those are it's like the four state of nature theorists. I mean, they're the guys who literally they cover the whole thing. They cover what liberalism like Hobbes is like the dark heart of liberalism, and then Rousseau's like the natural romantic side of liberalism. It covers the whole swath.
That's not a bad selection.
Oh yeah. That's how I learned it, because I was taught by students of Thomas Pangle, who's actually a pretty well-known educator, and he himself was a student of Leo Strauss. A lot of this neoconservative, this move back to classical liberalism actually comes from Leo Strauss. And his teaching. He was a Jewish philosopher himself, and a very erudite scholar who talked about Machiavelli. He talked about Xenophon. He talked about some of the Islamic philosophers during the Middle Ages, like Avicenna, and Maimonides, who's a prominent Jewish thinker. And he brought these things back into the fold. And a lot of people are looking to his philosophy now. And the alt-right, for example, a lot of the alt-right is modeled on his thinking.
On Pangle or Strauss?
Strauss, and also Carlyle.
Thomas Carlyle?
Yeah, they talk about these names all the time.
I know Carlyle.
Yeah, they talk about these names all the time. So we could definitely talk about that kind of movement.
This is a good idea. We should plan a stream for that. We should also do one talking about the thing you said, Rowan, going through point by point through history thing. I think we should do that. I'd like to do just an educational stream on that. Just no bias. Just try to look at the facts of what we know actually happened and just look at it from a completely objective standpoint. I think would be great. What time are we doing the movie tonight, Jeff?
It'll be fun.
Oh, Anton's thing. It's in a couple of hours.
Oh, that's right. That's a movie. Is it Anton's
7 p.m. Central. Yeah, it's the Carl Jung thing. And then tomorrow we're doing Eyes Wide Shut at 5 p.m. Central, and then doing our stream afterwards. And tonight, Anton's doing his Carl Jung discussion on individuation and alchemy on the PF Jung server. And that's going to be at 7 p.m. Central. So if you want the links to any of that, just email me. Well, do y'all want to wrap up today and take some time to go read? It looks like everybody's in reading mode right now.
Yeah, I would be down. And I might join some more stuff tonight. I'll have to see if I can go hang out with my girlfriend or not, but I might not have my car back. So if I don't, I will love to join for the.
Well, Anton's doing his thing on Paul's server later.
At 7.
You're
Okay.
welcome to that. Yeah.
I might join that if I can.
Bye, baby.
She's so cute.
Bye.
He says bye.
Okay.
It's been a great stream, guys. I really appreciate it.
For sure.
Occasionally things get a little heated,
Machine,
but I
thank
think
you
we
for
all
coming
respect
by.
each other here. So I'm really glad to be a part
Talking.
of.
I'm going to
this
read the
community.
Nakba
Yeah.
and the
Yeah,
Sabra.
I just want to let you go. I just want to let you guys know. You guys are my friends for life. You never had a friend like me. The Machine Lives. You guys.
Well,
you guys hit me up
certainly-
anytime. You guys call me anytime. No problem. You too, Rowan, man. Thank you, man.
We
Bless you.
appreciate
I'm
it,
loyal to his
man.
fault. So
Give Rowan a link to the Discord if he's not in the Discord. You guys come on, hop in.
Machine
there,
Lives? Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, for sure, yeah.
Machine has a server of his own.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
you guys
I
come in
will
there,
join.
Yeah,
It was
thank you
fun
so
as
much.
always, guys.
For sure. Thank you, man. Yeah.
All right, we'll do it again.
Bye.
all
For
right.
sure.
Bye, guys.
Peace.
Take care. All right, let me find some music to go out on. Something peaceful, maybe. It's nice. Take us out on this. Okay, well, that's the stream for today. Like I said, in just under 2 hours, Anton from the Gender Fucks is going to be leading a Carl Jung discussion on P.F. Jung's server. And tomorrow we're doing Eyes Wide Shut at 5 p.m. Central, followed by an after show discussion. So you're welcome to participate in any of that. And have a nice rest of your day. And well, tomorrow's the movie discussion, and then who knows what we'll be doing this weekend. So talk to you then. See you then.